welcome everybody. This is the third session of Homeschool Experts. So we have talked about PSAs in California, where you can homeschool on your own and file the affidavit with the state in order to homeschool. We've talked about charter schools a bit. I think many people have heard through the grapevine about charters and how they can help with hybrid homeschooling. There was legislature just passed last night, SB 98, that has gone through the Capitol that many people have been hearing about. They're concerned about, will they be able to get funding through the charter schools? Will they be able to be enrolled because of the wait lists? Maybe the wait list will be cut down. So they have a lot of concerns about that, but we have another option. We have another option for everybody that maybe some of you haven't heard about, which is PSPs. And that's what we are doing here today, is bringing these people who have the knowledge and experience of PSPs on to inform you and help guide you in case that's an option you want to use for your future and for your kids. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Marty and Carolyn from Excellence in Education to talk about themselves, introduce themselves, and talk about what their PSP is and what their organization can offer.
Okay, well, welcome audience. We're very excited that you're out there investigating. And the PSP is basically one of several options. And it is one of two really options within the private homeschool option. You have the PSP, which is a private satellite program, or you can file your own PSA, which is the affidavit. We're going to concentrate a little bit on the PSP side, of course, because we operate one. We're Excellence in Education Academy, and we also have our resource center. I'm going to start out with having Miss Carolyn here, my wife, explain how we got there.
I was a public school teacher in the early 70s. And partly as a result of that, I never wanted my children to darken the door of a public school. But I didn't know homeschooling was in its infancy in the 1970s. So it never occurred to me to do that until a neighbor introduced me to John Holt, who was an early educator and supporter of homeschooling. So in 1981, my neighbor and I decided to start homeschooling here in Monrovia together. As far as we knew, it was illegal. Well, for her. For me, I had a credential, so that. And she got busy with John Holt's Growing Without Schooling magazine and found a few other families. And we started the first homeschool group, Park Day group, in the San Gabriel Valley. So that grew. And then in 1991, some friends of mine who didn't feel comfortable filing an affidavit, because it was still the case that at that time that if you filed an affidavit, you might have a truant officer on your door the following week. So they weren't comfortable doing that. They didn't like any of the other PSPs that were around. And they asked me to start one because they knew they would like the way I would run a PSP. And the reason they liked my attitude was that I was outside the box. In other words, I really feel that it's important for each family and each child to have an individualized program, something that doesn't go lockstep with what the state mandates for curriculum might be, and that goes outside the box with other activities that don't look like school to most people. So we started our program in 1991, and or actually it was I guess it was 92. They started in on me in 91. 91, we started our little bookstore. And then in 92, we started our PSP. And so we have been going ever since. We've grown a lot, and now we have 3,000 square foot resource center with books and classrooms and all kinds of activities, park days, field trips. And we just try to support the needs of homeschoolers. Not everyone that comes in our resource center is in our PSP. Anyone, all homeschoolers are welcome. And so we have a kind of unusual program, probably fairly unique, at least here in California, from what I know. So that's what we are.
Okay, that's the foundation of our journey into being a PSP operator. We did homeschool 2 daughters successfully. Our Tanaya was homeschooled up to about 17, where she attended college full time. When she was 10 years old, she wanted to be a pilot. And since we have this educational philosophy, you work for the dream, you encourage the dream, we just really went all out. When we first started homeschooling the kids, I had a real job that required extensive travel. And so a lot of times I would go, field trip. They'll go, Dad, where are you going this week? Seattle for 2 weeks. You want to come? And boom, they come with me. And they got to explore. And we went to every air museum to satisfy her dream. At age 12, she wanted to be a missionary. And then fast forward to age 20, she's the first woman pilot to fly with the African Inland Missions Aviation in Kenya. And so that really brought forth to us the importance of the power of the dream. Now, Tylene was a whole different animal. You can never compare. And she was homeschooled up to 10th grade, but she was born with a genetical predisposition to Party 101. So she went to a Christian high school for 2 years. They both went to college, and Tanaya right now is a homeschool mom, stay at home, lives on a farm, really loves what she does. And Tylene is pastor of women's ministries to a large church in San Diego. So what we've done is kind of model our whole entire operation, our PSP and our resource center, on the concept of homeschool freedom. And I like Peggy's freedom starts here on your website. It's awesome. I just love it. And I love the mountain part because I met Miss Carolyn here on Mount Whitney on a backpacking trip. But we are excited to provide services for our individual clients and we have the, see if I can get all this other junk off the screen. Well, I'll just do this one first. Okay, we offer a lot of classes. We get, including, we have shop classes. I have auto shop and I have, as well as a wood shop. Because we're really big on vocational training, since I think that a lot of times college is not a good return on investment for those individuals who want to work with their hands, for instance. But we get into the arts, foreign language, a lot of math classes, language arts, home ec. Our science is very good, sponsored by Science to You. Those of you who know Jill Wilcox, she's got a fantastic program. We have a lot of special interest classes, including woodshop, model making, automotive. So we cover the whole gamut. And we also have entrepreneurship classes. And we're real big on kids who want to create their own businesses, which a lot of them do. And we have a program here where if a child creates a business, they're allowed to sell their product or service at no cost to them. I don't charge them any percentage, just to encourage the entrepreneurship part of our students. I'm going to jump over here to learning style assessments. We're very big on that. I'm going to let Miss Carolyn talk about that a little bit.
Yes, well, every individual has a different learning style. And that's one of the problems with a standardized school system. It addresses basically one learning style, approximately 15% of the population. Everybody else has to kind of twist themselves into pretzels in order to fit the schools and their program. So we don't need to do that as homeschoolers. And we studied for several years with the educational psychologists at the Learning Success Institute in Ventura, Mariama Palula Willis and Victoria Hodson. And so we are learning style coaches. And there's a little online assessment that people can do. And it evaluates 5 areas of learning personality, I guess you call it. So we don't just cover modalities is what most people think of in terms of learning style, auditory, visual, and tactile kinesthetic. We go very deep into that, but we also cover, besides modalities, we cover dispositions, talents, interests, and learning environment. All of those are very important, and different students need a different approach. So this is very helpful to help parents provide something that works. The math program that works for the first child might absolutely be unintelligible to your third child. So it's important to understand that, and that we try to help with that. And as an adjunct to that, I don't know if he can show it, but I created a different website, which is the game curriculum. And in the game curriculum site, I show how you can use games to teach practically everything, and at very many levels of understanding. And then I also line that up with learning styles, because your learning styles impact what games will work well for any individual child.
Okay, and then we get into the talents, interests, and environment. And those are very important when you want to figure out how best to teach your child, because our objective is to provide that security that's so important for learning to happen. And if we avoid the conflict between the parent, teacher, and the child, then we have a more inviting and safe environment. And we do highly recommend that both parents and the children take the learning style assessment, because your learning style will dictate your teaching style. Then beyond that, we also get into field trips. Field trips are just awesome part of the homeschool experience.
When I was a public school teacher, I had a dream. I didn't know anything about homeschooling, but I thought teacher heaven would be a van, 6 kids, and unlimited field trip funds. And if we needed to read and write, we could go to the library for a couple of hours. But I saw how much my kids learned on the very few field trips that we had. And I thought field trips is the way to go. So when I started homeschooling, it was a field trip, at least once a week, either an organized one with our group, or just something that I decided to do with the kids, like take them down to the tide pools because it was a super low tide, and take a look and find out what we could see there, what we could discover. So we have pretty much a field trip a week. And we're hoping to be able to continue that in September. Things have been sort of shut down for now, but we do intend to continue our field trips.
Yeah, last year we did about 50 different field trips. And of course, all these are optional. And what separates us from many other PSPs in the region is that you do not have to belong to EIE Academy to go on the field trip. We're open to charter families, we're open to other PSP families, PSA holders, because our main thrust is to support the homeschool community, not just zero in on a narrow segment that satisfies our worldview or whatever. So we're very inclusive in many respects. And then another area that we're very big on is Park Day. This is a place for not only the children to socialize, but it's also extremely important for the parents, because we believe that every homeschool mom needs a real good homeschool girlfriend. And we can create that through Park Day. And we do have a lot of dads come to our Park Days. We've got many families where the father is the primary and the mom can make more money, so she's out there making the dollars and dad's out there doing the homeschool routine. We also do curriculum counseling. We have a speaker bureau. We have online tutorials. And then I'm going to quickly see if I can bring up the game curriculum while Carolyn talks about her role in selling books that match the family needs.
Well, I tried to show people a variety of materials and as best I can, try to ascertain what will work for best for an individual child. If they do the learning style profile, it's very, very helpful. If they don't do the learning style profile, then I ask some pertinent questions. I show hopefully things to the child and see if I can judge from reactions what materials might be most suitable for that child.
And as you can see, we're big believers in the use of games. Explain the repetition.
Oh, well, we take a lot of training in a lot of different places because we want to know as much as we possibly can about learning. We've dealt with a lot of special needs kids. One of our daughters had some special needs. And so it's very, very important to us to find out how to deal with different kinds of learning problems. So we did a seminar with Dr. Karen Purvis of Texas Christian University. It was a 2-day program. And she said something during that really struck me, and it rings very true, but it's such a confirmation. She said that scientists in Houston had recently discovered that it takes about 200 repetitions to create a new synapse in the brain, unless you do it with play, in which case it will take between 10 and 20 repetitions with an average of 12. So if you want to learn something like multiplication tables or the states and capitals or whatever, you'll learn it much, much, much faster if you use play. Now, play comes in many, many forms, and for different kids and different adults, it can take a lot of different avenues. So in some cases, music will be part of the play. Play doesn't have to be a board game. There are all kinds of ways, but it needs to be relaxed. You have to relax in order to be able to learn well. If you are too tense, the learning will be retarded. So you don't want to take 400 repetitions for each fact, each math fact you want to learn. It's much more efficient to use games and activities to learn. So that's part of the point of the game curriculum. I wrote the game curriculum 20 years before I knew anything about that particular statistic. That's just a wonderful confirmation.
Okay, and lastly, we are very, very welcoming to the special needs community. We do have training. When I graduated from college, I spent time working with the adult population of special needs. And we have a heart for special needs, so we've done our homework, we've done our studies, and we can provide the special need families with probably the best service that I know of in the SoCal area. And then much like Peggy, we do have clients that are out of state. I have many clients in different states, and I also have an international clientele, primarily through missionaries and military people, and a couple of just world travelers. Okay, I think that will do it for our presentation. If you have any questions, I can answer them now, or we can go on to Miss Peggy, I guess, it'd be next.
Marty and Carolyn, I just wanted to mention that if families are in the Southern California area and are looking for curriculum and want to get their hands on actual curriculum, I know you touched on it, but I think it's really important that families know they can literally walk into your location, walk through that door, and get their hands on curriculum to flip through it and see if it's really going to work for them. And Carolyn is an expert in that. So we only have a few of those kinds of resources in California. So just be aware of that, families. Okay.
Here's a picture of a small portion of our bookstore. We have by different categories, and we have a whole room specifically for geography and history, because we're real big on history and the importance of knowing history. Thanks, Wendy, for that upshot.
Of course, yep.
Okay. Where are you located?
We're in Monrovia, basically
okay.
The intersection of the 605 and the 210 freeways, and we're south of it. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, do you have a website?
Yes, it's excellenceineducationhomeschooling.com.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'll post it in the chat too.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm so in alignment with all the things that you talked about with education and excellence in education. And I worked with you guys before, and I've found you to be so helpful and so patient. So I appreciate that. We'll go on to introduce Lauren. If you'd like to share about yourself, Lauren.
Sure. So my name is Lauren Mavro-Mati, and I run a GN Academy. To give you just a short background on how I got started, I have 3 children, and we've unschooled from kindergarten all the way up until they went to college. We started out on the East Coast, and we unschooled through multiple states. When we got to California, we were like, yay, it's so easy here to unschool and deal with the state. But not everyone felt that way here. I'm a bit of an extrovert. You know, a lot of my friends and fellow homeschoolers who were more concerned about dealing directly with the state, sometimes they wouldn't even file a PSA, file the paperwork. They would rather just be under the radar because they were so concerned about dealing directly with the state. So we moved here in the early 90s, and at that time I filed a PSA for my own family so that I could homeschool my own 3 children. And I found myself over the years adding people to my PSA so that I could help them out, or stepping in on behalf of my own school and helping them out in situations that varied from, I'm on the west side, so we got a lot of child actors and many child like Olympic hopefuls and people that I ended up needing to work directly with the studio teacher. They wanted someone to help out. We got a lot of students who are in the military and we're moving state to state and they needed help. So over the years, I've added students to our school and got to the point where when my youngest was about 16, I had one student who was my child and I was adding so many other people's children into my school to help out that I thought, this is silly. I need to just start running a PSP, and it actually became more effective. It's funny how you're talking to a studio teacher or someone else. If it's just me talking to them, for some reason, they don't listen as closely if I'm the director of a PSP, the exact same person with the exact same knowledge set, they would listen to me better. So Aegean Academy's focus has always been on empowering parents. It's my goal to get all of the parents who come to me to the level where they have the confidence and the ability to file their own PSA and be independent and work forward on their own. Some of them choose not to, and I certainly support that, continue to support that. But my goal is to get all of my students to the point where they're comfortable filing a PSA. I provide curriculum. I encourage unschooling, but I provide a individual unique curriculum for each child if that's what the parents want. I help them to incorporate elements of unschooling, which I think all of us do. Even the most traditional school at homers incorporate some elements of unschooling. We provide contacts into the community. I mostly take students who are in the Los Angeles area because I'm very familiar around the LA area with communities, park days and field trips and learning centers. And I provide connections to those communities and help the parents get connected to those communities, whether that means finding them the correct phone numbers or classes that will mesh with what their kids need, or whether sometimes that means going out myself and holding their hand and going with them to a park day or attending a learning center to evaluate whether or not it is something that would interest them. We charge a flat fee, and none of the other services are fee-based. I also offer grants for students. I have a lot of inner city students who can't afford those fees, and we offer grants to help with that and scholarships to help offset that. And pretty much Aegean Academy is an umbrella school, which we don't really use that terminology much in California, but what I do is I file all of the paperwork and maintain all of the records so that the parent can focus on homeschooling their own child. And then I hold their hand and help them get to the point where they're confident to homeschool and file that paperwork by themselves. So we look at the learning stuff. I think Marty and Carolyn covered all of that stuff beautifully. Learning styles, the game curriculum. We refer to Carolyn's game curriculum often. It's wonderful. And I agree with her that that's a great way to learn. Young children in particular, I think, learn very well if you start out with games, and they develop a love for learning, which is all of our goal. But for the most part, my job is to hold the hand of parents and help them through the process of becoming independent and confident to homeschool on their own.
I think sometimes that is a process, Lauren, like I was talking about before we started. I was so unsure of myself when I decided to pull my oldest Athen out of school that I wanted some kind of support. So I think that families learning and about the different supports we have, charter schools, PSPs, and then bridging into filing their own PSA if they decide that's something they want to do, or staying with the PSP for a long time. I think it's just nice to know that there's so much support and so many homeschool families out there willing to support new homeschoolers. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about our community is just the support and love we have for each other and for each other's children. So thank you
Absolutely.
for bringing that up, Lauren. I really see that from you in your program. So thank you. Okay, Christine.
All right. So Lauren, if that's the final word you want to have to say here, we'll go ahead and go with Peggy next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Peggy Webb, and I'm the founder and director of West River Academy. We founded the school in 1993, so we've been in operation for a good 27 years now. We came to California in 2006. I came. We originally were in Colorado. We do have an office there in Denver. And we filed as a foreign corporation. We are an S corporation, Colorado corporation. We filed in California as a foreign corporation, and so we can do business here. And once we got here, we started to look at the landscape of the California laws, and we found that there's no such thing as homeschooling in California. So that was new, except that the public schools have taken over the word. But what we found is that there is public school and there's private school. So if you don't want to have your kids in a public school, then you can choose a private school. And that could be one like, a parochial school, or, a brick and mortar type of place where your kids go and you pay tuition. But we also learned, I think it's the only state in the country where you can become your own school. And so by filing that PSA, you are a school. There's two different ways to file the PSA. One is as a group of 6 or fewer students, which most families would do. And then if there's more students, such as with West River Academy, we file ourselves. And then if you enroll with us, then you're under our protection. You are enrolled in our private school. So you are not a private school yourself. We are the private school that you enroll in. So I think it's really important to talk about the differences between going it alone and being with a school such as ours or the others that you've heard from. And I think the most valuable thing for families at the end is to have a high school diploma with a 4-year transcript, because that will help get you into a college if that's what you're planning to do. And if you don't go to college, you probably don't even need the transcript. And with us, it's optional whether you want one or not. But we do issue the diploma, and the diploma can be very valuable for just moving on in a career, just to show someone that you're a high school graduate, and you don't have to take the GED, which is a long study process. So that's the main benefit there, as well as the fact that we did go for accreditation. We are accredited by the National Association for the Legal Support of Alternative Schools. It's not one of the majors. So people do have to understand that by enrolling in an alternative school, there are risks. There's not like a done deal. It's not like every college will accept our students, but we've had, like a 99% success rate with our student graduates, not necessarily being accepted, but their transcripts are recognized as valid because the students are coming from a private school rather than a homeschool situation. So they're applying to colleges as as private school students rather than as homeschoolers. And although you can apply as a homeschooler, you will have a lot more proving to do about what you've studied. You have to list it and, go through the whole regime. And if you're an unschooler or self-directed learner, then it becomes quite a chore to translate all of your life experiences into what colleges will understand. And so when you enroll with us, we give you that transcript. Basically, you're going to make the transcript, which is we help you convert the life experiences into academic credits and make the transcript so that we can then send it on to colleges. So that's kind of the benefit we see as being the umbrella school, the PSP for you. And what we do encourage our students to do when they're teenagers is to take college courses. I don't know if everybody knows this, but community college is open to teenagers, to high school age students, with sometimes the permission of the school. So with us, you would go to the college that you're interested in and get the K-12 application, fill it out, send it to us, and we would sign it and say, yeah, we think this student should be taking college classes. And then the beautiful thing about it in California is that you don't pay tuition. So it's free to homeschool, to high school students. So you get college credit, and I believe you can take, I think 11 or 13, depending on the college, credits per semester. And all of those credits would go on our transcript in a special category called courses taken at XYZ Community College. And then we'd list those, and it would show the college that you're planning to enroll in that you have done college level work and you're accomplished at it. So it's just another level of proof that your education has been a really good one. So that's kind of how we operate. We would enroll you as a student, and it's a very simple process. You go online, create an account at westriveracademy.com, and then enroll your kids. Our fees are $375 for an annual fee for one student. And if you have additional students in your family, it's an additional $50 per student. And that covers the full school year, which for us is 365 days. It goes August 1st until July 31st. And that way, if you're going to create your program within that period of time, you have the full year to do that. And so it's an enrollment period. If you want to jump in after school has started and maybe it's in January, then we have a second semester enrollment option, which is a lower fee. It's $200 and $50 for each additional student. So that allows you to jump in, and you can enroll anytime for any period of time. We have kids that come in when they're grade 12 and maybe they've been homeschooling without either maybe a PSA filing on their own, or with some kind of program that's not accredited. And maybe they want that accreditation and they want a 4-year transcript from us, because then what happens when you apply to college is you have to fill out a college application, and they're going to ask you, where did you go to high school? And if you say, well, the first 2 years I was a homeschooler, and next 2 years I was with West River Academy, then they're going to put you into the homeschool pile, and you'll still have to defend everything you did. So if you'd rather not do that, you could enroll with us retroactively for those, say, grades 9 and 10, and then we would cover you under our umbrella for the grades that you were doing your own thing, not registered anywhere. And then if you registered with us for 11 and 12, then we'd add 11 and 12 onto your transcript. So you would have a full transcript for grades 9 through 12. And then when you fill out your college application, you're going to say West River Academy has been your high school. And that tends to make it easier for the people that are reviewing college applications, because they see that you're a student that has come from a private school. Here's the transcript to show for it. And very often they don't look beyond that. Sometimes they'll go to our website and they'll see what we're all about and they'll ask for more information. But very rarely have we been told that our transcript is not going to work for a college applicant. So I think that's a really big benefit of being with a school such as West River Academy, rather than going on your own, which of course a lot of homeschoolers do, and they create their own diplomas for their kids and their own transcripts, and it works just fine. So it's really your peace of mind. What is going to work for you? We hold your hand to the degree that you'd like us to. We offer consultations. We can help you put together a program that maybe has some structure to it, as well as some unschooling aspects of it. So although we do promote, as you see from our banner here, which is our website, Freedom Starts Here, we do promote and feel that freedom for you and the freedom you give to your children is going to work the best, because nobody who's human likes to be told what to do. We're all pretty much feeling like, even like kids, like, don't tell me what to do. I know how to do this. You know, they're very independent. They want to do things on their own. They have an amazing curiosity. And just as John Holt teaches, you know, fish swim, birds fly, and humans learn. That's what we do. So play, as other people have mentioned, is so important. Discovery through play when you're very young is really important. In fact, there was a study done by Raymond Moore back in the day by the US government that asked him to take a look at the best age for kids to start school, because they were hoping it was going to be like 3 or 2, you know, and then they could say, oh, we've got studies to prove this. But what it turned out was 12, was puberty. In other words, if a child is forced into a learning situation with reading and writing and having to hold a pencil and sit at a desk and push the pencil around a piece of paper, it's detrimental to their health. It's not good for them. Their cognitive skills, their emotional skills, their fine motor skills, their large motor skills, all of these things come together at about puberty, which is kind of no surprise when you think about it. And at that point, they are ready and probably more interested in doing something in a more formal way. So that's been buried, of course, because it didn't serve the purpose of the people who have commissioned the study. But so what we do is we promote the freedom. We give you an umbrella under which everything you learn, from playing outside, climbing trees, learning to swim, to sitting down and doing a curriculum, or being in a community college, or taking an online course such as Khan Academy, for example, or doing stuff that's involved with maybe the excellence in education, you know, resource stuff from their place. You know, even that would go under our umbrella. So we will consult with you to help you get an idea. And if you think about it, there is a spectrum on the homeschooling rainbow. You know, you can start way at one side, which is school at home, where you basically get a curriculum, you be the teacher, you sit your kids down, you teach them what you want to teach them, and the kids basically have no say in the matter. That's on one extreme, which we don't recommend, because curriculum is designed for a classroom with 30 kids and one teacher, and the teacher can't help every child do what they need to do. So they make a curriculum, and hopefully everybody is kind of near that place, but it doesn't really work out well. And so when you bring that home, you know, you've got mom, but then you've got mom being a teacher, and that doesn't always go so well. And you've got the bribes and the threats and, you know, the eruptions. And so to make a more harmonious family environment, it's so much easier to sit down with your child and say, hey, if you had $1 million and you could be doing anything right now, what would that be? And I encourage parents to do the same exercise with their kids. Sit down at the table and put a timer for 10 minutes and brainstorm. The idea is to allow yourself to go out of the box, to no limits. What would you do with your life? Where would you be if there were no constraints on money or on place? And it's amazing what people have come up with once they finish that exercise. You may have heard of the term world schooling. We have families all over that are doing world schooling. They're traveling. They've picked up, they've sold their homes, they've bought an RV, they travel the country, they fly to different countries, they spend time in different countries, meeting the local people, learning the language. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and you can find Facebook groups, you know, that deal with world schooling. And so it's really a great thing for families to just sit down and say, gee, what are we all about as a family? You know, what do we want to do? And sky's the limit. And they often ask us, well, if we do that, can we still be enrolled with you? And of course you can. So we can follow you all over the world and keep you enrolled. And if you need a transcript, you can order one for whatever purpose. And then when your kids are finished with their high school, whenever they think that is, then they can start our graduation project. Now, what that is, it's the only requirement that we have for graduation. And we ask the students to write a 3-page, single-spaced educational biography. And that would be recounting their life and educational journey from as far back as they can remember up until the current time, focusing on highlights and challenges and self-reflection, although some kids have found it to be quite therapeutical or, quite healing, because they get a chance to just look over their life and go inside and say, gosh, what was this all about? What did I learn? And how am I now after having done this? So it's really great. We've had some amazing stuff, and you can find it on our blog at westriveracademy.com. Just click on blog and you can read all the writing that our kids have done and what parents have written about it. So it's turned out to be quite a successful final project. So we don't require courses, credits, and grades for graduation, because we promote freedom, we promote unschooling, natural learning. So we thought, well, to walk the talk, we're not going to say, but to graduate, you need this. Instead, tell us about your life. That's more in keeping, sort of like the walkabout initiation in Australia, just tell us about it. And we also offer an alternative, which is a custom project. The student submits a custom proposal of how they want to illustrate their educational journey. And some kids have done it through art. One student did a comic strip. He's a really good artist, and he did his whole life through a comic strip portrayal. Others do video presentations like podcasts. Kids love YouTube nowadays, so they talk about themselves, in a podcast that they do, and they submit that. And then once that's accepted, then the transcript is optional, and they can have it or not have it. And I tell them, a transcript is for college. It's probably a good idea to have it now, because maybe in 10 years you're going to want to go to college, but you don't have to. And honestly, I don't promote college anymore. I just think it's too much money, and it's more of the same agenda that they have in the public schools. So what we do encourage, like others here, is entrepreneurial things. And we have kids that are teenagers that are already very successful in business. There's a lot of YouTubers, and some of them are making good money. In fact, we had one, Tanner Braungart, you can look him up, and he bought his mother a house when he was 16 years old with his earnings. So kids are doing amazing stuff. We have a lot of actors being in the Southern California area, and we help them get their diplomas early so that then they don't need to have an on-set teacher. They can actually take roles through their agent as adults rather than as children. And so that really helps them in their careers. So, well, that's some of the stuff about what we do at West River Academy. I guess I didn't really talk about how I got into it, but as others have said, John Holt was my mentor. That was back in the 90s, and I have 3 daughters, and they all unschooled. The first one never went to school until college, and she ended up working with us after a 10-year career in finance, and then she moved to Costa Rica, where she now has 2 little children, and she's a full-time mom. And my second daughter, Stacy, she did a variety of things. And then she came on board with us, and she's a registrar. And Rachel also did a variety of things, from schools to travel to all kinds of situations. And now she's our creative director. And some people might say, well, if the kids were in school, then they weren't unschooling, right? No, that's not the way it is. Unschooling means children get to have a say. Children get to decide how they're going to learn, where they're going to learn, why they're going to learn, what they're going to learn. And if a child chooses a school situation, it's still their choice. And they understand that if they're going to go into a school, then they will have to abide by the rules of that school, but they don't have to stay there. And that's the difference between the captives who feel, because their parents want them to be there, that they have no choice. But with unschoolers, school is a choice, and they can be in and out. they can try different things. And that's the beauty of it. So by the time they are 18, they can have had a variety of experiences that make them the person that they are and help them to move forward with what they want to do in their lives. And our goal is to have happy, thriving, content, and productive kids, young adults. And so that's what we do. And I guess I told you that's where I started. Back in 1993 is when we actually created the school. And so here we are. I don't know if I've missed anything. I would like to say that there is a Homeschooling Global Summit,
Yes.
which is coming up beginning on Monday. You can register for that. It's the second annual. There was one last year in 2019. Sir Ken Robinson was the kind of surprise speaker at the end, and there's been other major movers in the homeschooling movement, especially in the unschooling movement, and that's what this really focuses on. I'll be the keynote speaker for day 3, which talks about the global aspect of homeschooling. And Pat Ferenga of Growing Without Schooling, affiliated with John Holt, is the keynote speaker on day 1, which is Homeschooling 101, and that's on Monday. So please do take advantage of that. You'll learn a ton from just watching all those speakers and seeing the variety. Now, I have been asked to speak a little bit about the international nature of West River Academy and what we find, and you'll find out from Shauna as our next speaker, that there are groups and they get together and they learn. And they want to enroll their kids with us because it provides a little extra layer of legality, a little layer of protection, especially in countries where homeschooling is very risky. We started in Spain back in 2009 when we were approached by a man who had a group and said, hey, you know, it's illegal here and we're doing this anyway, but if we can enroll our kids in a private school in the United States, that would carry some weight and we're less likely to get in trouble. So that's blossomed over the years, and it's very healthy and growing in Eastern European countries like Romania and Hungary. South America is booming. The ministries of education in some of those countries validate our documents, such as Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, and Ecuador. And Chile actually is another one. But we have groups in all of those countries, and it's quite a phenomenon. And I think that it's growing. It will continue to grow in the United States as well, because people will get together and they'll be in a locale and say, hey, you know, we want to form a co-op. But how can we do this and be legal? Well, you can enroll your kids with us for a discounted rate, and then you are the administrator of your group. We enroll your kids and you work with your kids in the co-op, and we cover the legal aspects of it. So that's just something you might want to keep in mind when you watch the Homeschooling Global Summit, because you'll be hearing from people all over the world who are involved in this. So thank you. Hope I didn't talk too long, and I hope I've answered everybody's questions. So if I missed anything, just let me know.
No, I think I just wanted to mention, I think that a lot of families first struggle. I know that when I first pulled Athen out of school, I thought, oh, school looks like this. I have to sit him down at the table and we have to work through these workbooks. And I think part of the transition of becoming a real homeschooler is the opening of your mind of what schooling actually is. And I think you touched on it perfectly by saying we're learning everywhere we go. You take school with you. And I think that that's really, really important for parents to try and grasp and to let them open that world to their families. I don't know if you want to talk more about that, but I think that that's a really important thing. And then the other thing I wanted you guys to touch on, maybe when we come back to question and answers, is about accreditation. Some of your programs are accredited and others are not. And as a homeschool mom, I've always kind of understood that accreditation doesn't matter for kindergarten through, doesn't really matter until you get to high school. So I think maybe that's something we want to touch on. I don't know if you want to do it now, if we want to wait till after Shauna. Shauna, are you ready?
So I'm Shauna Reiswitz, and I started Pacific Sands Academy in 2012 after working with a really wonderful in-district homeschool charter from 2002 until 2012. And in that homeschool charter, I really discovered that, wow, these homeschoolers, and before that, I had worked in regular public school, private schools, different schools, and mostly with high schoolers. And when I was at that homeschool charter, it was an in-district program, and I just saw these kids are really, really happy. And things started getting a little tightened down, and I was working specifically with the high schoolers because that was my specialty. And I had to leave the program for kind of some various personal reasons. But I started Pacific Sands Academy, where I offer high schoolers an alternative way to graduate from high school, or homeschoolers. So they could be homeschooler. It originally was designed for kids who were maybe floundering in a high school situation or really having a hard time, as a way to step out of normal high school, find some freedom, and graduate. And I got a handful of kids, and I started getting asked questions about, are you accredited? Are you accredited? And I discovered Peggy's program, West River Academy. So now I do two things. I actually do a lot more than that, but two of the things here I do are Pacific Sands Academy and the Pacific Sands program of West River Academy. So either thing I do, functionally, I operate in the same way, but one is with the option of accreditation, which Peggy's program has offered. And so I use Peggy's school. So whatever I say applies to either Pacific Sands Academy or the West River program, Pacific Sands program of West River, is how I kind of differentiate out of what's been offered so far. And I love all the options that are given, because I'm also a huge believer in educational freedom. But how I offer kind of ongoing mentoring and goal setting for students. And this has worked really well, mostly for teenagers, where I meet with them 1 to 4 times a month. We come up with goals, we come up with learning plans, and they're able to get credits in ways that make a lot of sense to them, that are, fun ways. So there's things that they do naturally. Maybe they're skateboarders and they want to build a skateboard ramp. Well, they would get PE credits, they get construction credits. Or they're musicians, they get music credits, instrumental music, voice, whichever types of things they do through conversation and getting to know them. I can assign credits for who they naturally are and what they naturally do. And if there's subjects that we have this, it's an ongoing conversation with the parent and the teenagers. How do you want your transcript to look? What do you want it to be like? And they may want it to look kind of like a normal high school transcript. Well, they might need then US history or biology. We find ways for them to meet US history and biology in ways that interest them, meet their credits in ways that interest them. They could use YouTube, they could watch historical movies, they can experiment, they can find interesting experiments to do. They can, and I help them find those things as well. Let's see. So I do offer just interesting way. Basically, the way I discuss it with them is, let's find really interesting ways for you to get these credits. And the kids who have come to me have been really, really happy. They like being freed from high school. Some kids come to me that are already naturally unschoolers or not unschoolers at heart, and they found me themselves, and they will say, this is the thing that now I can talk my parents into it because there's an accredited program. I'm working weekly with a teacher. And it kind of gives families, extended families, a sort of answer that, yes, I belong to an accredited accredited program. I work every week with a teacher who helps me meet my goals for each class that I'm taking. And so that's kind of an extra thing, but it's still, I always go back to what it is that the kids are interested in doing and helping them find interesting ways to get those credits. So that's kind of, I mean, I can show like some of the credit, like some of the transcripts I've offered. Some kids really love to go in interesting directions. So I had one student who's been completely focused on this pandemic, and he's following everything. So his transcript this year, or this last spring especially, looks like math, introduction to statistics, science of health, medicine, and pandemics, communication, searching for truth in media, sociology, study of human societies in response to pandemics. So all those things, those courses, are based on his natural focus on COVID-19 and what he's learned. And if you discuss it with him, he knows just as much as anybody that I have met about this. And I've been following it pretty closely too. So it's really, we have really great conversations. I have another student who has traveled quite a bit, has special needs brothers, and she's taken, her classes look like, oh, what did I just do with that? Her classes look, oh, here we are, like advanced science of climate change, chemistry, engineering, and environment, global solutions for and by underrepresented women, early childhood development, emphasis on special needs. And then there's other courses that are kind of normalized that a college would recognize, like English 1, English 2, English 3. So we could be really creative with that. And that's kind of one of the fun things I do. And also, or we could have people who want, whose families are more traditional looking and they want it just to look like English 1, pre-algebra, US history, world history. We could work in any way. But the thing that really differentiates me is that I meet with the students one-on-one in a regular basis and help them develop what their program's going to look like. And I'm thinking to also expand it to K. I have worked with 8th graders in the past, but kind of expand to K-7 and offer this more for whole families. And what I've done,
you homeschooled your own children, so you've worked with kids at all ages.
Yes, I have.
Right.
I've homeschooled my own children. They were unschooled. Now they're really gravitating towards not working with me and going to regular school. So, you know, that happens too for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And I've been running a K-8 district run homeschool program that just ended in Mountain View. But during this COVID thing, we've still had Lego sharing circles or reports where they could report on anything they wanted. So we would gather in Zoom fashion and have sharing circles, or the kids would guide each other on different field trips. So this was something that I think that I could expand to a younger grade level. And I've worked with whole families too. So if I were working with a younger group, it'd be more closely related with parents and families. And what do you want your homeschooling journey to look like? How can I support you? I work with at charter schools and help parents find curriculum or help support them along their unschooling journeys mostly. So I'm open to all different types of supporting families to get the kind of education that they want. That's really, if I dig deep and look at what do I really stand for, it's educational freedom and supporting families to help their children get the kind of education that they believe in.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful.
That's what I do.
And I think you'd be good at all grade levels, Shauna.
Yeah, I have worked quite a bit with all grade levels.
Right, yeah.
I have.
I've known Shauna for years, and I can say that she has done that. I'm trying to figure out how to turn off notifications so my thing stops beeping. I wanted to read the questions. Does anyone that's here on Zoom with us have any questions for our panelists? You can unmute and talk to us if you want to.
Just wanted to make a quick comment because
Yeah.
everybody talked about transcripts and getting ready to go to college. But if your high school student wants to return to a high school and be as far along as they really are in high school, at least my local high school didn't even take credits from Stanford. They wanted a public K-12 transcript or a private K-12 transcript, and they could, you know, they didn't want a PSA, and they wouldn't take PSA credits, but they will take PSP credits.
Right.
And so the second reason you might want to do that is if your student changes their mind about being at home. They don't want to start over as a freshman.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. And they do take, the accreditation definitely helps. I would add to what Nancy says. I would, if I were working with a family that wanted to go back into, or even potentially wanted to go back into high school, I always recommend let's go the accredited route.
Right.
Well, that way the classes will be matched for what they really are. Without accreditation, they might take the credits, but you might not progress. Like it might not be English 4, it might be an elective in English instead when they evaluate your transcript.
And I have to say, I'm sorry,
No, go
my
ahead.
experience has been very different. Accreditation wise, here in California, unless you're accredited by WASC, W-A-S-C, the Western Association of Schools and Colleges,
Yeah.
The colleges really don't seem to care. It doesn't register for them. I've had students go everywhere from Stanford to USC to UCLA, and I've talked to many college admissions officers about the accreditation process, and they've said if it says WASC, which is really a public school thing, some private schools are WASC accredited, but if it says that, they pay attention. Otherwise, they say, no, it's not something that we pay a lot of attention to. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. And as someone in my younger years, in my late 20s, I worked for an accrediting agency in New England. And I can tell you that it doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. Even the WASC accreditation program is not, it's not something. I counted toilet paper rolls in people's bathrooms as part of my jobs back then. So I'd say to parents, pay careful attention to the school itself, the experience of the school, where their students have gone, where they've applied to college, and where they've been admitted. But it's not a huge thing. Maybe at one point in time it was. It is no longer a thing that you need to be an accredited school. And also, just to point on that same vein, students who are coming from a PSA here in California who filed a PSA would never apply to a college and say they were homeschoolers. They would apply and say they were private school students, just like students coming from a PSP. There are some colleges that have homeschool programs. UC Riverside is famous for its wonderful program where they welcome in homeschoolers, but still when you apply to UC Riverside, you would apply as a private school student because homeschooling simply does not exist as a legal entity here in California. People coming from other states may need to apply as homeschoolers, but California students would never apply to a college as a homeschooler, even if they file a PSA.
Yeah, I think that's an important. Oh, sorry. Was someone else talking?
I was just going to say, be sure we're recognizing the difference between returning to high school and applying to college, as we're talking about.
Yes.
Scenarios.
In respect to accreditation too, our experience has been, we're not accredited, nor will we ever be accredited, but our kids have gotten into every university that's imaginable without exception. The only exception are two areas. One, if you're going to go into public safety, meaning fire department or police department, they want an accredited high school diploma or a GED. CHESP doesn't count, but the GED does. And then for-profit colleges, because they've been under the microscope of the state for so many years, do not accept unaccredited high school diplomas.
Now, we have also had the experience where our former students had this problem, say with a law enforcement agency. I mean, I'm talking about somebody with a bachelor's degree who all of a sudden their police department who hired them says, oh, well, your high school diploma doesn't count, so now you have to go take a GED. But we found that if they were members of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, that those lawyers took care of it. Problem went away. So I would highly recommend being a member of a Homeschool Legal Defense Association. It's a little bit more than $100 a year, and it's well worth it.
Yeah, so I think the accreditation is really a matter of personal preference. If it makes you feel comfortable to have an accredited program, then you're going to enroll in a PSP that has an accredited program. If you're not necessarily worried about that, then you're not going to worry about that. I think it is interesting to note, though, that WASC, as you were talking about, Lauren, they're only the Western. So only our UC schools care about that. The kids that are coming from out of state to go to our UC schools, they're not going to come from a WASC accredited school. So just be aware of that as well, that it's just kind of depends on where you're coming from.
But they can come from, I think the colleges are looking for regional accreditation.
Yeah, regional.
And across the country, you're going to have about 4 or 5 different regional accreditations that are equal to WASC. So if you come from the Eastern Seaboard and
Right.
you have a regional accreditation, that's as good as a WASC accreditation.
Right.
I think it's important to research your the possibilities individually.
Right.
I was talking about high school when this conversation started about accreditation and credits. In our local high school, we were caught blindsided when they told my son, who had been taking math at Stanford, that he wouldn't qualify for a diploma from the high school because of math seat time. And the way to find out what they're going to do is ask them, ask your local high school, and investigate the colleges that your student wants to attend. My same kids got accepted everywhere, and our diplomas were recognized, even though it was a PSA that we used, were recognized as being homeschoolers because they look up your school.
Right.
So there's, and it didn't hurt anything. They still got in. It was fine to have a PSA for the college. It wasn't fine for the high school. So locally, ask your high school, you know, what do you do in this situation? And they'll be honest and just tell you, and then you can make your plans accordingly.
Yeah, you can make plans.
And I think it's important when we make a transcript for a student that we know the purpose of the transcript. So if the student is returning to school, then we ask, well, what school are you going to? And take a look at the course names that are used, say, for grade 10. And take a look at the graduation requirements and make sure that when they make a transcript with us, they give us the course names and the credits and the grades to put on them. So they have to do their homework to choose the course names that will correspond to the school that they're putting their child into. Then it becomes easy, and have a little bit more credits than less, because you don't want to end up a half a credit short, you know, to graduate from that particular high school. So it's really important to make the transcript for the purpose that it will be used.
Yeah, to do your homework on the high school you want to go back to, and also do your homework on any colleges your child is considering. Make sure you're talking to those admissions departments and looking on their websites to see what kind of processes you have to go through if you're a private school student, if you're a public school student, or if you're a homeschooler, if you're from another state. So definitely look at that kind of stuff.
And participating in one of these PSPs would have someone there to help you
Right.
navigate that. That's the purpose. One of the main purposes of doing this is that you've got someone professional, one of these people that spoke today, to help you navigate all of that. It's
Right.
it's not as easy as you think to match the course names to what your high school is doing, for example. It's wonderful to have a PSP situation that gives you homeschool freedoms with all of this back stuff that we're talking about and confusing you with handled by that program.
Right. All right, so there's some questions coming through. Are we ready for these questions?
Go for it.
Okay, on Facebook, they're asking, does a PSP report your enrollment to the state like a charter school would?
Yes, but not by name.
Not by name.
So you just report tally marks, right? You're not doing a monthly enrollment. You're doing the number of students, the number of kids that are enrolled based on a snapshot on a certain day, usually in October. So you're not turning in names, or you're not turning in an annual, like a list of how many, like the attendance record for each student. It's just a tally mark once a year.
Right. Would I still need to file a PSA? So I think that that's an important thing to kind of discuss, that if you're with a PSP, you don't need to file a PSA and you don't enroll in a charter school. And if you're in a charter school, you don't file a PSA and you vice versa. If anyone wants to talk on that.
I'll tackle that for a minute.
Okay.
If you file a PSA and belong to a PSP, you're in violation of Ed Code because you're enrolled in 2 different schools. That's just to start out with. But the real answer is that the purpose of the PSP, the umbrella, is to encompass you as a family as being enrolled in a state-recognized private school, as long as the PSP files the affidavit.
Right. So our PSPs are filing that same PSA affidavit, private school affidavit, that our independently homeschooled families are filing. But when you're an independent family, you're only reporting that you have 2 kids or 3 kids, and they're reporting that they have however many kids are enrolled in their PSP. Does that make sense?
True. And also, if you have more than 5 or 6 students, you'll be listed in the private school directory, whereas the individual family most likely will not be listed in the private school directory.
But they're not listed by name, like Lauren said, right?
No, no, no.
Okay, let's see here. So if you don't go through, oh, it's jumping around. If you don't go through, where'd it go? I have a local Christian private school, which I've looked into. You pay a portion of tuition and are technically under them. Is this the same thing, which you guys are talking about?
Possibly.
So yeah, there's a lot of Christian private schools that also offer PSP support. So this is just a few of the PSPs that we have here in California. There are a lot more, and there are quite a few Christian ones run through churches and private schools. Let's see, if you don't go through Inspire Heartland, can you access the California State Homeschool Funds? Okay, so if you go through a charter school, you're technically a public school student, and that's how you're able to access educational funds. If you're filing a PSA or part of a PSP, no, there's no access to state funds. You guys, anyone want to take that one further? She's asking if you can get access to state funds.
You have access to local special education services from your local school district of residence. That's it.
Right. They're asking what the average cost is for a PSP and if they're charged monthly or annually.
I think most of us are in line. I know we're at $350 per family per academic year. And then if you're a high school student, I throw in a $40 surcharge, a maximum $80 per family. Okay. And I think Lauren is pretty close to that. And from what I can pick up, Peggy, you're not too far off either.
Yeah, it's a flat $250 fee to register with the GN Academy per family per year.
And then for us, if they take our classes, that's extra. That our fees do not cover classes because each one of my teachers is an independent contractor, and I don't regulate what they charge.
Right, right. Yeah, and most of the PSPs, if they offer an extra service like a field trip or some kind of extra, they're gonna charge for that separately because it's optional. Families can choose to take part in that or not. just so you kind of understand why it's not an all-inclusive price. You're not gonna, if you don't want to take classes with any of Marty's teachers, you don't want to be charged for that. You know what I'm saying? So I think the next question, is it affordable to use a PSA to homeschool? I tend to think it is. I think that the prices are very reasonable for the whole school year to have someone helping you keep those records. I'm actually thinking about joining one now myself because I just filed a PSA for the first time this year and I don't necessarily like keeping the records. So
I'll give you a good deal.
that's right.
I wanted to add just my costs are, I have the flat enrollment costs, and it's different whether you're just Pacific Sands or you're the Pacific Sands program of West River.
Right.
But I also charge a tuition, and the tuition is for the monthly, weekly or monthly meetings that I do with students. I'm even going to contract next year out to somebody who's willing to do daily meetings with the students if that's what they want to do. Right. But that tuition at this point is $220 a month for meetings, and the students set up their own meetings. And I always tell parents it's a lot less expensive than private school or therapy.
Right. And this is for
kind
high
of
school,
like
the high school level.
Life coaching in a way is what I do. In an ongoing way.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. A lot of high schoolers don't necessarily want to be engaged with their parents in homeschooling anymore. And so having someone like Shauna take that over for you, I think would be willing to pay for. The next one is, do the PSPs work with students with IEPs, offer special services, or make accommodations?
But we certainly do make accommodations. We refer students to special services, and sometimes because of the research we've done, we're able to show parents or point them to resources so that they can actually provide some of these services for their children and do a better job than a once-a-week session with a specialist. So there are a lot of options that people just aren't aware of to help children with special needs. And we have a big list of referrals and an awful lot of resources that we can show parents that they can check out and see what would be helpful. But in my experience, and I started working with special needs back while I was in college, I volunteered at a school for orthopedically handicapped kids in Santa Ana. And I saw there, and I saw in the 8 years we worked with a therapeutic writing group, and ever since, with everyone I've worked with, a parent who's dedicated can do 100 times more than a therapist with a lot of alphabet soup after their name if the parent knows what to do and how to help their child. Because a parent, as we know in homeschooling, a parent cares much more about a child than even the most caring therapist. So yes, there are some things that are outside that need really specialized expertise, but the right therapist will often teach the parent how to carry on at home.
Right.
So yes, I hope that's helpful.
Lauren,
we also have, yeah, thanks. We also have students who graduate with us who are special needs. And the beauty of our graduation program, when they write their educational biography, is that anybody can help them. We've had kids that have dictated them to their mothers, and then their mothers have edited it and put it in good shape. So the whole idea behind it is that you don't have to be an excellent writer, but you have to be resourceful. So it's just like if you were going to write a book, you'd have an editor. So there's nothing, there's no cheating involved. It's like, can you write, can you present a good, well-written paper with any resources that you need to make it presentable? So that way kids that, you know, do have the special needs, whatever it may be, even if their, you know, their cognitive skills are not as advanced as they should be, still they can graduate because they and their parents believe that they are ready to move out into the world from a high school student position. So that's what it's all about.
Great. Lauren, did you have anything to say about IEP?
Yeah, well, as far as Aegean Academy, I know that it's very difficult for a private school that does not have a brick and mortar location, that doesn't have a traditional school location, to access the funds from the federal government and the state government. But we do have access to the regional centers, which are all across the state of California. And I work very closely with students who have special needs to get them the services they need through the regional centers. I find that some of my students would like to access public school services, and I've been able to get them access to those services in their district. That depends very much on your school district and whether they're willing to work with a private school or not. But the regional centers are wonderful and offer a lot of services.
And I think, Nancy, you were touching on the idea that the students, if you wanted, you could actually get IEP services through your district still, even if you're in a PSA or a PSP. Is that what you were saying? I think I lost Nancy.
Yes, no, you didn't lose me.
Okay.
Yes, every district is legally bound to provide special education assessment and services to all students that reside in their attendance area. That means, though, that they offer the family, like, oh, you can come in for 20 minutes at these 3 separate times every day to the resource program. You may not want those services.
Right.
But the families that I have had used this and worked with me in the past have mostly used that for the assessment and the generation of the documentation that they're looking for. And then we work together, just as all of these providers have just explained, to help them find services privately that will take care or help the child with their needs. And those services, I also am a vision therapist, an optometric vision therapist. It's my other job. And I know that when I give vision therapy as part of an IEP, I have to limit the scope of my services to that student, because all of the services must be directed at Common Core standards of some kind. And so it's not the same. And so when you're saying parents can figure this out for themselves better, I 100% agree with you. But using the district to get the IEP, to get the testing done and things like that is valuable.
Can anyone talk briefly on, so I'm not an IEP expert. I refuse testing and refuse to go through the process with my kids. I wanted to just figure it out personally as a homeschool mom who's with my kids all the time. But I know that there's a lot of families that definitely need those IEP services. And the way I understand it is actually the IEP can follow your child into college and really actually help them be able to access things like more time for tests and help with taking tests in college. I don't know if any of you have any experience with that, but I am wondering how that works.
I have 3 sons with special needs, and the IEP did not follow them to college. A 504 can follow you to college.
504, okay.
Colleges locally in California tend to want to reassess students when they come in. But yes, all of the accommodations, any modifications even, are provided by the colleges, and they do a good job. That we've found they do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think that's an important resource to know about. I didn't really understand how it worked.
Yeah, can I speak on that for a second too?
Yeah.
So I just have experience with Orange Coast College and Cal State Long Beach. So Orange Coast College, sometimes you can reassess there. Sometimes they don't want to do that, and they want you to come with assessments already in order to apply for certain grants or be part of their programs for special needs. or get accommodations. Sometimes you have to have that already on your transcript or already from your previous school. So that might be a problem for some of the PSA people if they don't have documentation or something from the regional centers or something to prove that they need additional supports or that they can tap into some of that funding. Some of that could be a problem. So I would just say whatever your local schools are, to go ahead and call them and verify some of those things. If you don't have any access or you have denied access to some of those supports in the younger grades, that may end up being a problem at some point in college level. With Cal State Long Beach, they're one of the only schools around that offers a special admittance program for people who have learning disabilities or ADHD or things like autism, right? So they have a special admit program that you can apply to that's separate from the normal admissions program. And most other schools do not have that. It's not real easy to get access to that program unless you already know about it and you tap in and reach out to them. So if there are things in the way, so let's say you have a learning disability, dyslexia, and you have trouble getting all the requirements finished at, let's say, Orange Coast College, and you can't get all of the requirements to transfer into Cal State Long Beach, you can go in as a special admit with all of your other criteria met, except for that one thing, and be able to get admitted into that college with support, with free tutoring, and with sometimes skipping over some of the prerequisite classes and just doing your 1 or 2 classes in the English, let's say, that you might need with tutors and with support. And then you can graduate in your major with a C level in that class. So the point is, they provide extra supports and sometimes some different expectations for those students that have a learning disability or that are on the spectrum. And a lot of other programs don't offer that sort of thing.
But the need for those services needs to be pre-existing from your grade school or high school, right?
Oftentimes it's really hard to prove once you're already an adult that you have a background where you've needed accommodations or where you have a diagnosis but you never got one. So sometimes that is a problem. I know that you need at least testing. It doesn't have to be a diagnosis, but some sort of testing in order to get into the special admittance program for Cal State Long Beach.
Okay.
Because they can look at the testing and say whether or not you qualify based on the testing. You don't have to have a legitimate diagnosis, but it is much easier to apply for these programs or get into these programs. It takes longer if you don't have the actual diagnosis.
Okay, that's good to know.
Now, maybe people would be interested in the way a private school might handle this. I don't have extensive experience, but I do know about 2 private schools, both in the San Diego area, who accepted students on provisionally who didn't have IEPs, but had learning disabilities that were serious. And in both cases, I'm talking about 3 kids, 2 at Point Loma Nazarene and 1 at Christian Heritage. They were offered special services, special tutoring help. And they could have that as long as they needed it. And so in the case of 2 out of 3, they were entirely successful and graduated. One of the students didn't make it past the first year. So these are private schools. These are kids without any IEPs beforehand, but the private schools would give them a chance. And in
Private
general,
colleges,
that is,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, what?
Are these private colleges?
Yes,
Private?
I'm talking about, in this case, it's Point Loma Nazarene
Okay.
and Christian Heritage. It's now called San Diego Christian. So I just happened to know because I knew the kids. I helped all three of them.
Okay.
So I followed their progress.
Right.
I haven't checked out other private schools, but I think you would get a similar, in many, many private schools, you will get the same offer of tutoring help.
Okay.
So
really it's about asking for what services are available. And I think even that's true with our PSPs. If you're interested in enrolling in a PSP, you're going to call Lauren or Peggy or Shauna or Marty and say, these are the services my child's getting right now. What is your experience with this? How would you suggest I take this? And then talk to them about that. I think is good. There's another question. Does the annual fee that the PSPs charge include planning and curriculum assistance if necessary?
ours does.
Okay.
Yeah, excellence in education. We will give them as much help as they need all the way throughout the year. We don't have a limit on the amount of time. If they need help, we're here 5 days a week. They can come and or phone.
Right.
And we'll help.
Lauren?
Yes, same here. It's all included.
Okay. Peggy, where are you?
We offer assistance throughout the year with phone calls and emails. And if this family wants a specific full 1-hour consultation, then they pay an $80 fee for that.
Okay. Shauna, I lost you too somehow.
No, I'm here.
Oh, good. There you are.
Yes. I offer that mostly through the ongoing tutoring.
Right.
I mean, ongoing mentoring that we're constantly revising and coming up with curriculum and assistance. And that's part of the ongoing mentoring package for me.
Nice. Okay, the next question from Facebook is, could someone quickly summarize the different implications of no accreditation, accreditation that is not WASC, and WASC accreditation? I think we confuse people with all the accreditations, and I do personally find it confusing.
I think the important thing is if you intend to graduate from high school and go to college, to speak directly to your college admission officers, the college you're interested in, and ask them those questions. And there's no harm in calling and doing that when your child is a 9th grader. Even they want to hear questions from you, you can call them and say to them, you know, we're looking at this school, it has this accreditation, is that going to help us? Or, you know, they're wonderful for the most part, and they're willing to answer your questions. So go directly to your college.
Yeah, they definitely are willing to answer questions. Go ahead, Marty.
In respect to that, if you get a answer that's really important down the road, try to get that statement written and sent to you and signed, because college counselors come and go.
Oh.
And they may interpret doctrine a little bit different than the next counselor. So we're always looking for documentation.
And the people will very often, you'll get a completely different answer from a different counselor at the same time at the same college. Typically, this may sound a little cynical, I'm sorry, but I think it's true. From most colleges, I'm not talking about the top tier elite schools, but for most colleges, there are 2 requirements. And I'm serious here. They have room and you can find a means to pay. Okay? You do not need to even go to high school at all. You do not need a transcript. You do not need anything. We've had students who left 8th grade and entered college full time. Cal State LA has a program for that, formal program for that. We've done a program with Rio Hondo. It was a 5-year federal program that we participated with. And there are people who literally walk out of the hills. They've never been in any school at all, and a college accepts them. So, you know, they want to hype it up. They want to say, well, you have to have had this and that and the other thing. And it's nice. That's good. You want your child to be prepared. You do not want to send your kid to a place he or she is not prepared to succeed at. But don't get over concerned about their requirements, because they are almost always extremely flexible.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
if speaking about accreditation, the original question, the difference, the WASC and the other regionals they were supposed to be independent. That's the whole purpose of accreditation, right? Is that someone reviews you and then is kind of a consumer protection agency by saying, yeah, we've reviewed what they do and they're good. But what turned out down the road is that they're very much, the government and the accreditation people are very much in bed with each other. So it's not a separate agency that is independent. They just keep joining together and becoming bigger. And so that's how they operate. Then there's other accreditations, such as the one that we're part of, which is really more of a consumer protection agency. These people make us do an online or an on-site visit. They want to check everything that we advertise and make sure, number one, that we are advertising properly our services and we do what we say we're going to do. And that way, if you take a look at us, you might want somebody else saying, yeah, I can vouch for this school because I've independently evaluated them. And that can bring some peace of mind to families when they're trying to decide, are they going to take my money and run? Are they reputable? And then of course there's all the testimonials and things like that everybody provides to show that others have been satisfied with their work. So I think accreditation, as I say, at our website under, there's a tab called accreditation. There's an article about it. What does it really mean? Okay. So you might want to review that and just get a feel for what it really is. Not so much who are the people who do it, but what does it really mean? And as you all have said, you know, it has various degrees of meaning for different people, and every family needs to do their own homework, calling colleges and talking to high schools and so forth, and then decide what is my level of comfort, you know, and that's what it comes down to.
Right.
Yeah.
Christine, do you want to take some of the questions from the chat there while I make sure we got the ones from Facebook?
Sure. I think we've answered some of them in the chat, but there's one here that asks, if a student is in the GATE program now in 5th grade and wants to go into AP and honors class in their regular public high school in 3 years, in order to get into those AP programs, would it be better for them to enroll in a PSP to make sure their transcripts are written properly to reflect accelerated coursework, or will a PSA work just fine?
So you're talking about a 6th grader?
A 5th grader?
A 5th grader?
Yeah.
Well, my experience has been that if you're filing a PSA and you want to put down that you want to be able to list the classes so that your child can go into 9th grade and not be considered remedial, is it good to belong to a PSP? Yes, if you can find a PSP that has an experienced director, experienced people who know how to help you with that. But for the most part, there's not a lot of attention paid in elementary and middle school to what the students have done subject-wise. That becomes really important in 9th grade and from 9th grade on. I've had some schools contact me about an 8th grader who attended and wanted to know, for example, the algebra program they did, what did that involve, to see if they're ready for Algebra 2 or whether they need to do maybe a part 2 of Algebra 1. But for the most part, When you get a cumulative file for elementary or middle school, it's not going to include specific subjects. It'll include a lot of times a report card that'll have grades in those subjects. If you've got A's in math and English and all of that stuff, and you go up and want to take AP courses, I've never had a problem with that.
Another way to look at it as well, since the parent is asking about AP at, for a fifth grader, AP is overrated right now. Everybody and their uncle has AP classes, so it's lost its shining armor, if you would. A lot of our kids now are doing concurrent enrollment, where you're actually getting I'm talking about age about 14 and older for our kids. They're getting actual college credit through the community college. And then we also encourage taking CLEP exams. Let's say you take a regular chemistry class, man, take the CLEP the same month that you've finished your chemistry class. And if you pass that CLEP, that is a college course taken care of. We just had a student graduate, he's 18, and he has his bachelor's degree already, and primarily use CLEP to do that, and concurrent enrollment.
Now, it might be that the parent it sounded like the parent's thinking of sending the child to the public school for high school. And if that's the case, then, and I think they want them to go into AP, but they want to be accepted into AP. So I would call the high school and find out exactly what they require in terms of documentation to show that when this child is finished 8th grade and wants to enroll in the public school, high school, and go into AP, what kind of documentation do they need to show to prove to the school that that student is, that it's appropriate? I kind of doubt that it would be a problem. From what I've heard, the schools are shoving students into AP classes. I don't know if that gives them more brownie points with the state or what, but a lot of kids who really don't belong in AP, or they're putting them in way too many AP classes. So it may not be a problem at all, but if they're talking about going into a public school, I would just call that school, find out who the AP counselor is, or talk to the whoever would admit that kid into AP, and I would just do that research now.
Yeah, the higher level classes make them look better on their California schools dashboard. So that's why they're doing it.
There you go. Yeah.
So, can someone answer, I don't know the answer to this one, up to what age will regional centers work with when referred by a PSP program, or to a PS, like if the student's enrolled in a PSP, up to what age will a regional center work with a student with an IEP or with needing services?
I can answer that if other people don't have an answer.
You probably have more experience. I have worked with maybe 7 or 8 students who've used the regional center, and my experience is regional centers work all the way through, even adults they will work with. But Christine it sounds like she has some personal experience to share.
Yeah.
So if you have gotten into the regional center, it used to be much easier to get into regional centers. Now, if you don't have your child in the regional center for services prior to age 3, when they become more under the heading of the school districts, it's much, much harder to fight to get those services. However, if you have been homeschooling this whole time, they might say, oh, well, we don't have, you weren't referred by the schools earlier, you didn't self-refer, so maybe we still need to do these assessments with you and see if you really do qualify for these services. Sometimes it's a really huge problem and a hassle. You sometimes have to get an attorney You sometimes have to get denied by your health insurance for coverage of some of these services. So it's a really big hassle. If you think your child has some special needs and you know you're going to want, you know, like child care or supports or, you know, additional services that the normal school district can't provide. Like they usually provide speech therapy and occupational therapy and APE and things like that, sometimes behavioral therapy. But if you need more behavioral therapy than what is academic, right? If your child has like self-injury behaviors or might progress to injuring other people or things like that, or screaming in public, things like that, that school or academic behavioral therapy cannot cover or don't usually cover. Things like that, you have to be able to really get those services as early as possible and get at least your name on a file because it's really difficult to do anything later on. A lot of the time, kids will get denied over and over again if they're older. So if you have a 16 or 17-year-old, you're not getting in because they have a transition plan at 17, and they have that conversation with families to get ready and transition. They can still provide services at that time. But if you're brand new and you're trying to register with the regional center for the first time, they're just going to deny you. So that's really difficult. When it comes to, sometimes they can cover some older kids, but usually they transition them out at 17. And so a lot of the time, if you have a child where they might need to be on Social Security or things like that, or be enrolled in a program like the Department of Rehab to get special services for working as an adult. If they need those things, that's usually what the regional center coordinator does, is set up a transition plan for you to get those matters handled so that when your child turns 18, they no longer provide those services. But there are some small little niche places where they still have to provide some sort of service. Going back to the question previously, I want to say if you want your child, if you didn't want the services or didn't want the testing done for your child during their most of their schooling, but you know you want to tap into some of the resources or supports for college, I would say before you transfer to college, while you're still a high school student, in that last year or maybe even in junior year, you would want to, and especially if you're going to be transferring early or taking classes early concurrently with a community school, you would want to do it even sooner. But if you have the testing done, the schools do not diagnose, but they do the testing for free because they have to. So I would say do that testing earlier, even if you don't want services from your school, but you might need them or want them for college. Do the testing anyway, because at least you have documentation. Right. But you can get services through the school district when you cannot get services through a regional center. Okay. So regional center only covers what the school district won't cover, and that's for really severe behaviors, like I said, self-injury or injuring other people or things that are non-academic completely. Then the regional center has to pick those up, but it's a huge fight. If your child is not really young, when you're trying to get services, it's really difficult from the regional center.
But you can get it through your school district even if you're filing a PSA or part of a PSP.
Yes.
If you're part of a charter school, you get services through your charter school.
Correct.
They're technically a public school, right? Donna is asking, or she's kind of making a statement, and I think you PSP leaders would be able to speak to this. I don't know where my kids want to go to college yet. She's just trying to leave their options open. So can you guys speak to that? I think that's but a lot of us parents are feeling that, like we want to keep their options open because they don't know. My 16-year-old still tells me I'm not going to college. Well, that doesn't mean he's not going to decide when he's 20 that he wants to go to college.
Well, think about honestly, what are the skills needed in college? I'm presuming that the questioner is thinking about courses taken and so on. So if they want to, usually when someone asks that question, it means they want them to have the option to go to a top tier school.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd look at what in general are the requirements at a top tier school. It's probably similar or very close to the University of California requirements. And that's easy to look up, but it's basically 4 years of English, they're called A to G. So there's a list, and you look that up and cover it. The thing is, those may not be entirely appropriate for your child. You might not have somebody who really wants enough math to go through 4 years of high school math, because that's probably going to be at least a pre-calculus. So, but I wouldn't be terribly concerned. You can probably 3 to 4 years will probably do it. And there's an awful lot of other things that the top tier colleges look at besides the transcript. Right. But I would say if you want to be that safe, look at the A to G list and follow it as best you can.
A general thing that we do here is we look at kindergarten through about 7th grade to create the love of learning and how to self-teach. And then by that time, hopefully, the child has some inkling where they might want to go. And then from 8th grade through 12th grade, we prepare them for age 18, 19, so that they can exercise the options they want. Now, one of the biggest traps that parents get involved in is that they're not looking at what the child wants, they're looking at what the parent wants the child to do. And that gets in the way of the freedom of choice for the child.
Right.
And it leads to great frustration. So I look at the 40-60 law, that only 40% of the child's time during the day should be academic, but 60% should be exploration. And if you do the exploration correctly, it will convert to academic credits. But try to find out what the dream is of your child. And I have a technique when I interview students. I get my pen out and I'll say, "What is this?" And they'll say, "A pen." I say, "No, it's a time machine. And I can make you at any age I want." Then I'll point to the mom and I'll say, "What do you want your mom's age to be?" And they'll say, "Oh, 25. And I go, "You weren't even born yet. Poof, you don't exist." But then I make the child 25 and I ask them, "Are you living in a house, a condo, apartment, a car, or a box?" And they'll give me, generally speaking, one of the top 3. But one kid said a car, and I said, "Well, what kind of car is it?" "It's a big Winnebago. I'm going to travel." I go, "Fantastic, go for it." But then I ask them, "Okay, you're going to live in a condo. How are you able to afford your condo payment?" So I'm not asking them what they want to do. I'm asking them, how do you afford it? And they'll say, "I'm going to have a job." Then I high five and go, "Congratulations, you have a good work ethic. I like that. But what kind of job is it?" And more often than not, they'll come up with a specific thing they want to do. And then we work backwards. And we, "Okay, you want to be a lawyer. What do you think it's going to take to become a lawyer?" And we come back all the way on the bottom of the sheet at their age, let's say they're 15, and they'll tell me what they have to do to achieve passing the bar and getting their diploma in being a lawyer. At that point, then we have this sheet of paper, and then I flip it around and I say to them, "Is this what you told me?" They'll look at it and go, "Yes." Then I say, I put the line and the X, I say, "Sign it." Now they have a contract. contract with themselves, not with their mommy, not what their mommy wants, not what their daddy wants, but what that child wants. Then you have the pathway that's a real good commitment, created by the child, owned by the child, and we're nothing but facilitators to help that child meet the contractual terms of their personal contract.
What I tell people, teenagers especially, is to keep a journal. Keep track, and no one's going to look at it. It doesn't have to be written perfectly. Just keep a journal of what you're doing and even what you're thinking throughout your high school years. Because as an unschooler, you may not have course names. But if you keep track of what you're doing, then when it comes time to make a transcript, you can go back and look over what you've written and say, okay, you know, we've done a bunch of this. Well, that's PE. We've done a bunch of that. Well, that's general math. You may not have done algebra 1 and 2 and geometry, but you can do practical math and consumer math and business math and personal finance, things like that, to put on your transcript. And what will happen too is when you go to college, you're going to take placement tests in English and in math. And if you don't place into college math, they'll give you 1 semester of math, which covers all of high school. You may not get, the credit may not go towards your college graduation requirements, but it will bring you up to speed so that you can then go into a college math course. This happened with my oldest daughter. She unschooled her whole life. And finally, at some point, she decided she wanted to go to college. So we hired a tutor. And in 4 months, she did all of the high school math so that she could take her ACT and do reasonably well. Her forte was more English and humanities, but she got all that done. Then she went to community college, graduated from there. And what people don't realize is that once you get your AA degree, you can go in as a junior into almost any college in the United States. You can graduate from the top schools, you know, without having to compete as a freshman. So that's something that people should keep in mind, so that, you know, you can choose college at any point. You don't have to decide when you're 12 if you're going to college or not, and if so, which ones. Don't stress about it. The child will decide. And what's really important with freedom is that it goes hand in hand with responsibility. So I tell a lot of parents who are just so afraid that they are going to be held responsible if their children fail. Tell your kids that you're going to support them to make their own decisions. And when they make those decisions, they own them. That's their responsibility. So they don't come back to you and say, oh, it's your fault that I did this, and why did you make me do that? And if I hadn't homeschooled, I would be so much better off. You know, that's not okay. You know, parents have to be very clear with their kids that this is a joint journey, and I'm helping you, and the school is helping you, and you have the freedom to make decisions, and they are your responsibility. So it's important.
Peggy, you're right on. It's so important, that ownership, responsibility. And I have one case of a parent who just micromanaged her daughter and had expectations for her daughter. And when that daughter turned 18, she's gone. Because she was never given the freedom to direct her own life. And so as parents, man, you just got to be partners with your kids in that academic journey, and don't feel that they got to go to college. What a waste in many cases.
Yeah, and get over the fear that, you know, that your kids are going to fail. That's something that we as adults have been brainwashed by the system into believing. And we pass that fear on to our children, and we all suffer because of it. So one of the major points I make when I talk to families, to moms especially, is you're not responsible for your child's success. And you know what? That child will succeed because she or he wants to succeed, not because of what you have or haven't done. So do what you need to do to de-school, which is deprogram
Right.
And you do that by educating yourself. Read John Holt, read books that are going to empower you as a parent to say, I can do this, and so can my kids. And how do you fail anyway? You know, what does it mean to fail? And what does it mean to succeed? Maybe success is just being happy. That's it. Don't we all want happiness for our kids? And if they find it, it doesn't matter where or how they find it, as long as it's healthy, you know, then it's not, we're kind of worried. But, but yeah, it's a big fear thing with parents. And when you can bring that up to them and let them face their fears, and you help them face their fears, you face it with them while you're talking to them, and give them some homework to do to help them get over those fears. Because it's not something they decided to do. I'm going to be afraid for my kid's future. It's something that they don't realize until you point it out and say, well, what's it based on? Let's talk about this. And you can just see or hear them relax and go, yeah, right.
See,
So
fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And I preach that a lot, because so many people look at the evidence or fail to look at the evidence. But if you look at the evidence and is it real or false, then you can conquer the fear. And then action conquers fear as well.
The fear is really from all the propaganda from our schools, that you must do it our way or you will fail. And that's what parents come in with all the time. They're afraid that they will fail their kids. And we have to sort of detox them. But my older daughter pointed out to me what I think is one of the most important skills for life and college. And it's something that homeschoolers learn, and people who are in school often, if not most of the time, do not learn. And that is how to teach themselves. When she first went to 4-year school, she had gone 1 year to a junior college, and then she transferred. And that first year at the 4-year school, I asked her what she thought her most important benefit was from homeschooling, because she was telling me how great it was that she had been homeschooled. And so I asked her, well, what was the greatest benefit? And she said, without even thinking, she said, I have the ability to teach myself. And that was because she had turned out to be the de facto dorm tutor on her floor, because other students didn't know how to compensate when they had a teacher who wasn't really getting the message across. It wasn't a problem for my daughter, because she had been, and we were unschoolers, but she had learned to teach herself. That's what we considered learning. She decided what she wanted to learn and she'd go for it. So I think that's the most important thing you can prepare your child with, the ability to teach himself, so that when they're off in college, they'll be able to do that. They don't have anyone holding their hand there.
And at the age of 42, she still does that in how, raising her kids, trying to find out the health issue solutions. So it's a lifetime gift to give your child if they can learn to teach themselves.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that every freshman starts from zero in college. You go to English 101, you have a bunch of 18-year-olds in the same class. They have the same textbook, they have the same teacher, they're given the same assignments. Why couldn't an 18-year-old that has never stepped a foot into a classroom start with other 18-year-olds in an English 101 class and do at least as well?
Right.
We tend to think that they have to be so prepared. But if you are familiar with Homeschooling for Excellence, Mickey and David Colfax wrote that book about 4 kids, and the first 3 went to Harvard, and they were interviewed. by a newspaper, and they were asked, well, how could you start at Harvard without ever going to school? And he said, well, what's the big deal? You sit in a class, you do the work. Like, for him, it was like, why are you asking me such a silly question? You know? So we have to remember that too. And even when you put your kids back into high school, for example, we can send the transcript to the school. So they're going to start grade 7. Well, they're going to be in 7th grade with every other kid in 7th grade. There's no reason they can't do the same work that the other kids do, considering that the kids are not learning that well anyway, and they have to spend the first half of the year reviewing what they probably forgot over the summer from the previous year. So it's not rocket science. It's not intimidating. You know, our schools don't have very high standards to begin with, you know, and they have to accommodate everybody. And so our kids can sit in the class and learn something. They don't need a huge amount of preparation or any.
Right. Yeah.
I agree completely. I think we have a couple more questions on the chat. You know, I'm looking it up now, but when I started homeschooling, I deschooled myself. I already kind of had that mind frame anyway. And I definitely decided my 2 main goals for homeschooling my daughter were to create a love of learning and develop empathy, because everything else flows from there, and you're going to have a happy, successful person on your hands. You know, by the time they are adults, they will be able to engage with the world and be happy and find fulfillment with those 2 things. So let me go into the last question I see here, which is, when applying to colleges, I understand that with a PSP, a student applies as a private school student. However, would it still be clear to colleges that the student was homeschooled? The essays and variety of courses would reveal that, correct?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it depends what you put on the transcript, you know? So we encourage kids that are making a transcript for college, which is the main purpose of it, to use the names of courses like English 1 or Language Arts 1, you know, Algebra 1, Geometry, the same course names that they have in high school. And that's for the core courses. And then after that, you have electives. We'll pick the electives that show you off. What were you passionate about? What did you study? What did you spend your time doing? And let's put those into course names. So that creates the individuality that's attractive. And then you have the core courses that just satisfy requirements. So that would be my answer.
You have to look at the transcript as a marketing device. And that's how I look at it. And your purpose with a transcript is to sell your student that student is the best option for the need of the college. So it works out real well. Don't be afraid to use marketing, because it works. We're a free enterprise
What
nation.
the colleges are looking for. They're looking for the students to sell themselves in those essays that they're asking them to write. And by looking at their transcripts, they want the students that stand out, that have done something unique from all the other applicants they're getting. So to me, it just seems like kids that are homeschooling or kids that are in PSPs or PSAs are those kids. Those are the kids they're looking for. They've had the freedom to develop the skills that they're passionate about and the things that they're going to be studying in college.
And it's not unusual for our more successful students to have over 300 units on their transcript, which is really a selling point compared to the 210 you get out of a public school.
A public school. Right.
So I have a question about that. We usually recommend that the kids stay under 300 so that there's no red flags. How do you feel about that?
We never had a student rejected because they had more than 300 units.
Okay.
And I think that what it does, if you have legitimate classes and if you convert the exploratory activities into academic credits, it shows a very broad spectrum child, not a narrow-minded child or narrow experience child. And people with broad experiences, I think, are more interesting, tend to be more successful, and would fit into the needs of the university to have even a broader influence on that child.
Some of these kids have so many units because they have taken so many college classes. already.
Oh, right.
And they get double credit. When it's a college class, they get essentially double credit and a
5-point
5-point
weighted GPA.
weighted GPA.
Do
So
they have to record all of their college, like your college classes are already going to be on your college transcript? Do you have to put them on your high school credit? Like Peggy, if the kids are doing all kinds of other explorational learning, could you just leave the college ones on college and high school on high school, or do you always suggest combining? You guys.
We usually put grades 9, 10, 11, 12, right? And then at the end of that, we have a heading that says college courses taken at XYZ Community College. And then we list those courses so that they can see that they are college level. And that's a specific part of our transcript. Yeah.
We blend it all together.
Okay.
It depends when they're, and we put down the actual college label, you know, like MUS 101 for Music 101.
Right.
And then we have a little asterisk on our transcript. We have two ways to weigh the GPA, and that's through AP classes or college courses. We have a little symbol on the right-hand side of each year. And then my transcript does the math to incorporate the GPAs to reflect the accuracy. And that shows the college too that this student is capable of college work.
Right.
If you don't have them listed, then there's no indication that that student can do it.
And I think an important thing to remember is that credit hours aren't just assigned randomly. Every credit hour corresponds to a certain number of hours in class working on something and a certain number of hours working on it outside of class time. So if you've got a student with who's accumulated a lot of credit hours, it's just important to realize that you really need to fit. It can't be an unreasonable amount. It can't be, I've had a student before who's told me, yes, but I did this 7 years of coursework in 2 years at this other school. And yes, they could have, but then my thing was, how are we gonna show that as credible on your transcript that you actually finished that? And one way of doing that is not all 9th graders need to start with Algebra 2 or geometry. Maybe you did geometry or Algebra 2 back in middle school. So you're starting at a higher level math up in high school. You wouldn't even list those things that they went over. My son, for example, picked up a geometry book, looked through it, took the final test at the end of it, and was like, in 3 days' time, I'm done with this geometry book, let's move on. So we didn't count that as his 9th grade math. He moved on to the next math class, and that was part of his middle school program. He had finished that geometry then. But it is important, I think, to just think of how the colleges look at credit hours, which is the number of hours that you've spent in a classroom and doing homework and preparing for that class, and make sure that it looks reasonable on your transcript.
I think it comes back down to what Marty said about it being a marketing tool. And we emphasize to families, especially unschoolers who, you know, have their journals all mapped out, that we're now going to take everything you've done and we're going to put it all together and now take the pieces that we want to put in each grade level to make it look normal, right? And so ultimately, it doesn't really matter how much time they spent doing something. If they've done practical math, we'll put it in grade 10, give it 10 credits and an A, so that at the end, they have a typical looking transcript and it's not exactly the number of hours. They don't have to be counting hours. Again, it's marketing. It's putting things where they belong at the end of the 4 years so that it looks presentable and acceptable to college admissions. And it's easy for them. And I tell people, you know, you got bureaucrats looking at this stuff. They don't want to think too much. They want to go over it, check the box, did this. Make it easy for them to accept you.
Right.
Yeah, and what we do too is we look at things not from a time perspective, but from a mastery perspective.
Right.
So let's say it takes a student a year and a half to complete Algebra 1. We would give them 1 full year, not a year and a half, but we'd give them the A because they mastered it. So the next semester is next year's geometry. They knocked that thing out just like Lauren's boy did in a short time period, let's say under 1 semester. They would still get a full year of geometry credit as long as they master it.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah.
Some of the moms are asking about like gifted learners. What kind of support?
That's what homeschooling is for.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
We take away the label.
Sorry, but schools
basically.
are for dumbing us down. If you have a gifted learner, you don't want to be in a school.
Right.
You want to be where they're free to learn.
Right.
So it's just find the right, whatever they need and provide it to them.
And that's what you guys are experts in, finding those resources that are around to help families be able to enrich their children's learning. I think and there's a lot of programs out there for gifted kids. And what's that one? The Athena, some academy online, you can take classes. And yeah, there's lots of things. So Monica, I'll get with you and give you some things, but
there's so many wonderful free classes online too.
Yeah.
And then I also pay for some subscriptions, like from Skillshare, for instance. So students can use my Skillshare account to take courses in digital photography or digital marketing or whatever, and they can earn credits by taking those classes as well.
Yeah, and also kids can graduate at any time they want to.
Right.
You know, they don't have to be 18. We have kids graduating at 16. I had a boy graduating when he was 14, and then he started college. And so it's about when is it agreed upon by the child and the parents that the child is ready for the next stage, whether it's college, whether it's doing their own thing, being an entrepreneur, going and being recruited by a company, you know, to work for them. That's when they want to graduate, you know, and not just because 18 is the magic number, you know.
Right.
In respect to gifted kids, we had a very fascinating graduation about 10 years ago. I had my youngest and my oldest ever graduates. My youngest one, he came up, he got his high school diploma, and he had his AA degree at the same week, and he was age 12.
Right.
I had my oldest ever graduate. A mom came to me a couple years earlier and said, look at Marty, I don't have a high school diploma. I really want one. And so I said, okay, let's go through it. And so at age 35, she had her high school diploma. She was the mother of that 12-year-old.
Oh.
So we satisfied the exceptional student situation, and we satisfy very easily, am I qualified to teach?
Good. Well, there was recently a story circling in our Facebook groups for Orange County of a young boy who graduated from a community college with multiple associate's degrees, and I don't even think he was high school aged. He was very young. So we happened to have a talk with Golden West about that same time that the article came out, and someone's asking about what age you can start concurrent enrollment, and what Golden West, the dean of Golden West, suggested is that if they're younger than high school, go talk to them, that there's accommodations that can be made and they can start younger than high school, but you need to have a conversation.
Yes.
And understand, I think it's important to note that when your kid goes off to take college classes, whether they're 12 or 14 or 16, you, the parent, aren't the one who goes and has that conversation. That child needs to be not only academically able to do the college classes, but able to go into that environment and talk to those other adults and have those conversations and deal with the school. It's not like elementary school or high school where mom gets to go in and talk to the teacher and find out what the homework is and how to help their child. And If your child is ready for that on top of the academics, then yes, they could probably thrive in that environment.
Right.
And then you want to be careful what classes you put your kid into. Let's say you put your child into a drama class. Well, that drama class might take up adult issue drama plays with language and implied whatever. You cannot go to the teacher and say, oh, my child's only 12 years old. You can't do that. Nope.
Right.
You're going to have to live with the rules of the school. So
Right.
just use wisdom as you do this.
Well, and also that once they take a college class and they pass the drop date, that lives on their transcript forever, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So just make sure that they're ready. They're asking if a parent is interested in year-round schooling, can that be accommodated with a PSP?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And Peggy, you were very clear in saying that your school runs all year. And I always say our kids learn all the time, everywhere we are. So
Right.
sounds like that.
You got to accommodate the family deal. We have back in the day, we had a friend out in Arizona, had 3 extremely high energy boys. So she would homeschool 3 weeks on, 1 week off. Those boys needed that 1 week off. And she did that consistently. And then when hunting season came, 3 weeks off. It was just on the calendar. So the beautiful thing about homeschooling is you have the liberty, the freedom to homeschool the way you want.
Now, a lot of people may not know that in California, there's no statutory number of days per year or hours per day that are required for private schools. So there's total freedom.
Right. One more thing on the accreditation. If you're worried about keeping your options open and worried about accreditation and you want to still have freedom, you don't necessarily have to worry about the accreditation if your kids are going to do like college concurrent enrollment. Because like Peggy was saying, once they have their AA, they can transfer into any college as a...
Not even the AA. Once they have 20 credits, I
20
think,
credits.
for most colleges.
I think it's 30
Maybe.
Okay, there's a couple more on here on our Zoom chat. I don't quite understand this one. Maybe you guys will. How do you all handle the Common App? Do you fill up the school profile and counselor portions? Do you have a school number for the SAT registration?
Yes, we do fill out the Common App for students that are going to use that. And normally when there's a recommendation, because, well, Shauna, for example, has one-on-ones with all of her kids, so she knows them very well. We don't. So we ask the parents to write the recommendation, submit it to us, and then we fix it because they can't say, well, he doesn't like brushing his teeth very much. You know, like we can't make it look like it's a parent, right?
Right.
So take all of the skills and the qualities that the parent has brought out, and then we make sure it looks like it's coming from a school counselor or whatever else they need. And then we upload it. We upload the transcripts mid-year, end of year. We'll do whatever we need to do to help them with a Common App.
We do the same, exactly the same way. It works great.
I do the same thing, and I also will help kids with their college application essays. I'm a lot of helping and editing and working back and forth, and I'll work with them on that as well as part of their applying to college process.
Nice. Lauren?
Yes, absolutely. We do the same thing. I don't have the parents write something up. I generally have the students tell me what things they think that they would like to see if they were in the other position. If they were the person reading, what would they want to know about themselves? And I try to incorporate all of that in.
Nice. How about the UCs? Are you listed in their list of high schools, or when filling it up, do you type in the name of the PSP and manually input course names?
That usually depends on whether you've had students apply the year before. I found that if students have applied, if a student applied last year to the UC system and typed in a GN Academy, then the next year the student, they'll find it already on the list. But then the following year, if no one has applied, sometimes it falls off the list. So their list is temperamental. I'm not sure how it works, but whether or not you find your school on the list or you type your school into the list, that doesn't affect the legitimacy of your school.
Oh, okay, good to know. There's a big thank you from Natalie. She wants to thank you all for helping our viewers put all the pieces of the puzzle together. That's very sweet, Natalie. How do you present your Oh, I think that's the one we just answered in the comment app. I am thinking of the counselor portion. Do you emphasize the independent study nature of the school? We didn't talk about that part of it.
It probably depends on the student for me. It depends on probably what they want to go into, what they plan on majoring in, what school they're thinking of getting into. I think of that, the independent study aspect, as being a bonus. I mean, colleges want to see students who are self-motivated. So usually I would say yes, but if the student feels very strongly, and I have had at least one student like that before who did not want any emphasis on the homeschool independent study portion, then I will respect that.
Right.
I think
I don't emphasize that either, because it's more about what the student learned, how the student learned it, and his own qualities about his own education.
Okay.
So the fact that it's independent study doesn't really enter into the final essay, I guess. I mean, you can say in there that he was involved in independent study as well as online this, and I mean, it could be a list of things, the way the student learns stuff, but I wouldn't just say it's completely independent study and just go on and on about it. It's more about the student,
Right.
than how he learned. Yeah.
Right.
I have a little portion that says something like the Pacific Sands program exists to help students outside the box of traditional education. Students learn through hands-on activities, through reading, and I list a few ways that they do learn.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of that in the counselor, but again, the student and I will often work together so they know that this is what I'm putting in as the teacher, the counselor recommendation.
Good. Do students that are with PSPs have to take the standardized state testing?
Nope.
No.
No.
Okay. Let's see. How do you handle community college forms? Email, in person, regular mail? Do you approve anything the parent requests? So I guess that means if you're the PSP, how are you handling filling out as the principal of the school?
It depends on the college. And they're getting more and more electronic than paper. So it's changing, and we accommodate the changes.
Depends on what the parents want too. Sometimes parents will want to meet with me and they want to see me sign the forms right there. And a lot of times that's because they want to ask questions about the classes that their child wants to take,
Right.
and whether I think that their child can handle that. So I'm willing to meet with them in person. For the majority of parents just want me to sign the form and let their kids try it out.
Well, I think that's the beauty of a PSP. You guys are custom tailoring the children's education, so you offer the supports that families need, and they can pick and choose which ones they want. I'm understanding that correctly, right? They're asking, do you have experienced high school counselors? You guys are those experienced high school counselors, right?
Yes.
Right.
And I probably can speak for all of us in saying that it's not just us. I mean, all of us, one of the things I think that's really important when you're searching for a PSP is finding someone who has a lot of resources, a lot of connections in the community, and has been around for a long time. Homeschooling in California, for example, and knows the state organizations, knows your local community, knows people that they can reach out to. Like each one of us can do a lot, but we also have our networks of people who
Right.
help us out.
Right.
And I also believe it's very important for PSP owners to be involved with at least one, if not all three statewide organizations, at least have membership.
I agree.
Right. Some moms are asking about vaccination or immunization requirements for enrolling in a PSP. Is that required? How does that work?
It doesn't really have anything to do with whether you're enrolled in a PSP. What the law says is that people who are families that are homeschooling not in a classroom environment. So if you're enrolled in a PSP and you fit that model, you're homeschooling not in a classroom environment, then you're exempt from the immunizations. But if you're homeschooling within a PSP and you are enrolling your child in maybe a learning center or a program where you're active with that program multiple days a week, then you may not fit that exemption, and you'll have to talk directly with the learning center about what's required for you to be present. So it's not really, I mean, the law really doesn't address, it addressed homeschooling in general and homeschooling outside of a classroom environment.
But a learning center is in a school, so they wouldn't collect immunization records, right?
Right, but some learning centers I'm finding are requiring immunization. It depends on the learning center, but I think the spirit of the law is if you are homeschooling outside of a classroom environment.
Non-classroom or homeschool.
The thing about, you know, law is we all have to be able to read it in plain English and interpret it to the best of our ability.
Right.
So I tell parents to take a look at that. What does that mean to you? And
right. And then check with the learning center that you're possibly taking classes at. Well, and a lot of families would take classes at possibly like a private Christian school, and that private Christian school would fall under the requirements of collecting an immunization. So,
right.
but
Community
to enroll in
colleges.
your PSP, do you collect immunization records?
Yes.
I don't require it, but we do. I ask parents if they want to submit an immunization record for their cumulative file if it's not already in there.
Okay. Marty, you were saying yes, you require.
We want to have the immunization records, which includes a waiver or a statement saying that we're not going to do vaccines. We're anti-vax ourselves, but if the parents have the record, I'll put it in their cum folders, because sometime down the road, maybe the law changes.
Well, and it's technically a requirement of the student records, right?
Right. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Right, so we either have their immunization record or we have a statement that they don't immunize.
Right. Okay.
Right? It's the same form, actually. It's just you mark that they're exempt. So that's all.
Right. Peggy?
Yeah, when you enroll with us as part of our online application, it says, do you immunize? And you can say yes or no. And if you say yes, then you can say that the records will come with the school records, which we'll request from the previous school, or yes, we will provide them, or no, we don't immunize for religious or medical or personal reasons, and we just take whatever your answer is and put it down in your family record. Now, do you guys go to Shots for Kids and put down the number of kids that are vaccinated and the number that aren't? Do you do anything like that? I noticed that on that form, there is ungraded. So you can have a total number of kids for grades K through 8, and that, oh wait, no, yeah, it is Shots for Kids, right? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they tell you, they keep emailing me that I have to do it. So I go there, but I did find kind of a loophole, which is if you're ungraded and you only have to do it when you're in grades K and 7, then if you're ungraded, you have 0 kids in both of those grade levels. So I just fill it out that way. And they're ungraded, so they get 0 from me. And it's good to inform the families and notify them, let them know that we don't keep score. We don't give that information about individual families and whether they do or whether they don't. That goes nowhere. So the only reporting is that Shots for Kids, and the families' names are kept out of it.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And what I do is I base my Shots for Kids numbers on my enrollment on October 1st. And my enrollment always exceeds the October 1st number, so that gives me some wiggle room. And I can always find enough people in my school that have immunizations, so I can fill out the Shots for Kids thing with legitimacy.
I think that's that brings up an important point, just to reiterate, is that people's names never go from them to us and then to the government in any way.
Right.
They just come from them to us, and we never submit anyone's names for immunizations, for enrollment, for anything. The only thing that we may get is somebody saying, hey, is this student enrolled with your school? And then you would have that record to say, yes, so-and-so is enrolled in Pacific Stance Academy. But that's the only time that we would ever be giving our information back out, is if a particular organization asked if needed, some confirmation that your student is enrolled in a school.
Right.
We never voluntarily give that to any government institution.
Right.
Yet. Hopefully we never have to.
Right, hopefully.
I really hope that doesn't change.
So I think these kind of go together. Why would you choose a PSP over filing your own PSA? And if you're joining a PSP, what questions should you ask before enrolling in that PSP?
Well, in respect to PSP versus PSA, with high schoolers, see, we sign entertainment permits, we sign work permits. Parents cannot sign either one of those. So you have
That's true.
a legitimate reason to be part of the PSP if you're looking to have your child employed in the entertainment industry, which I have a lot of, and then just work permits. And then also, I think with letters of recommendation and transcripts, it's awful nice to have a different address on the transcript than your home.
Yeah, it's true.
So some benefits for high schoolers to be PSPers.
Well, why didn't you guys tell me this before I filed the PSA? I'm learning a lot.
There you go.
It's a little bit in my mind like, why do some people hire a gardener to cut their grass when they're capable, or why do they hire someone to do your taxes when you could probably do it yourself? It's a matter of where you want to put your time and energy.
Right.
And if you want to focus your time and energy on just the curriculum and your child, and let somebody else handle the paperwork and the documentation, that's a major benefit.
And I think it comes down to peace of mind.
Yeah.
I'll be talking to people and they're asking me, do I need to enroll with you? And I'd say, 3rd grade, I don't think so. Just your money. But they're like, but I feel like, I want to. I'm okay. I try to talk them out of it sometimes, but because they feel comfortable doing it,
Right.
and if they feel comfortable, then it's for them.
Yeah.
Right. And if you are, want to just take charge and do everything on your own, you certainly can do it. So it's level of peace of mind, ultimately.
Also, I think if your family's receiving any government benefits, if you're on welfare, getting food stamps, those agencies will want attendance accountability. And I think you have a better legitimacy being part of a PSP to sign those accountability papers that come out every so often. And we do have a fair number of people that use social services.
Well, or if they're getting SSI for their children.
Right.
So
Yeah.
sometimes there are forms, and it makes it a little easier for them. I don't know if it may not be a problem to not to just do it yourself. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I
but-
think that's why we're holding these panels, so people can see what all of their choices are, and then they can decide which is best for their specific needs for the school year or and beyond. Because I like people to know that we have so many options in our community. One of the other questions is, what are my options if AB 77 and or SB 98 pass and I haven't signed a master agreement with a charter school yet? So SB 98 did pass yesterday, and what that does is basically, well, the governor has not signed it, but it will freeze ADA funding for public schools at the public school the children were in last year. So that means our charter schools who are looking at a huge influx of enrollment requests may not be able to enroll all of those kids because they possibly won't get the funding. So it's not a law yet, but I would definitely be looking at what your other options are. And the charters may come up with a solution. I'm not sure what that solution would be, but it's good that you're on this panel discussion and that you're seeing what your other options are if you don't want to send your child back to a classroom next school year due to COVID or some other reason.
I think that's going to go to court for one.
Right.
So we'll see what happens.
I hope so.
There's a fabulous free document on the California Homeschool.net website. It's called Just the Facts, and you can download that. It goes over all of your options to homeschool step by step. It's put together by like a conglomerate of people who shared their experience. It's wonderful.
Right. So we have lots of options if you can't get into a charter school. And I think that your question there about the master agreement is accurate. Know that if you're enrolling in a charter school, you're not enrolled until you've signed that master agreement. So
I think it's important for people to understand, a lot of people go to a charter for the funds. And of course, so if that's been precluded,
right,
for some people, a lot of people think that it costs a whole lot of money to homeschool. Now, if you file a PSA, it's free.
Right.
And honestly, thousands and thousands of families homeschooled back in the 80s with no textbooks at all. We had the libraries,
right,
and a little math workbook that we got at the drugstore. And those kids—
Target has them in that 99-cent bin every school year.
Right
on.
There are so many resources now that are free that you can literally homeschool for free.
Yeah.
For just pennies. You don't have to worry about the cost of it. And sometimes the less money you have, the more creative it's going to get and the better it's going to get. So I would tell people, don't be unduly worried if you can't get into a charter, even though you can't use that money. That there's a better way to go anyway.
You may not get your horseback riding lessons, but you can still survive.
Right? Yes. No horseback riding lessons, no Disneyland, Marty. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Terrible.
Is there any way to get scholarships to enroll in a PSP? I know, Peggy, you said for sure that you guys offer them.
I think it was Lauren.
Oh, yeah. Lauren, it was you. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have grants or scholarships, but we do have a foundation which I created, and that has money, and that so people can apply for a grant to that foundation.
Okay.
That would then you know, now actually I have to change that. It's not to individuals. The foundation is not able to grant to individuals, but to groups. So such as Shauna's group, you know, she could ask for a grant from that foundation to support her students that you know, can't finance their own education.
Oh, okay, nice. And so Lauren, can you talk more about yours? Sorry, I got you guys confused.
No problem.
2.5 hours ago.
Well, I will look at every family situation, and if the money is what's holding them back, we will either waive the fees or we will, I actually have some very generous homeschool parents who are finished homeschooling their children who have stepped up and said, don't ever let anyone, walk away because they can't afford to go. Reach out to us and we will scholarship them in. So between those generous people and the fact that, like I said, if there's a situation, I'm sure that all of us are in that spot where if there's a situation where there's a real need, then of course we're going to look at what other options there are.
Right. That's what makes our community wonderful. Marty?
Yeah, we do scholarships, but don't try to take advantage either. If you get a scholarship and you got a nice Mercedes brand new in the parking lot, I don't know.
Marty's gonna pull the emblem off the front and sell it.
Yeah, but no, our purpose is to help the homeschool community.
Right.
And we have a large enough enrollment that I can surely hand out, scholarships on a need-by-need basis.
On a need basis, right. Shauna?
I offer some scholarship.
Right.
Yeah, and reduce costs. I have different plans for monthly tuitions. So if there's somebody who can't afford the $220 a month, then we could meet fewer times for a lot less. And there's other things that I've done creative when people need it.
Right. So if you need something, just reach out to the PSP you're interested in and talk to them about your situation personally.
Another thing we do is for my volunteers, like my part day volunteer, my field trip volunteer, I give them free tuition.
Oh, nice. Okay. Okay, more on the app, the application. In the 2019-20 UC app, after typing in a name of a school, a window opens up where 3 options were given: traditional school, independent study, and homeschool. Which one would a student in your PSP check?
They keep doing this. It's the same on the new DMV application.
Oh, really?
It's the same. It's showing up everywhere. I tell students who are enrolled in Aegean Academy that this is a traditional private school.
Right.
This is we do offer independent study, but I tell them mark traditional. These categories don't really fit California law. I don't know who's come up with them.
People that want to know who's homeschooling, that's who came up with them.
But homeschool is not an option
not a thing, right,
for anyone in California, right. So it's got to be one of the other two.
Right. Yeah.
I just tell them mark traditional. I don't know what we're supposed to do there, but I say mark traditional.
Well, homeschool does not exist in California, so unless you're coming from another state that homeschooling does exist, you would not mark homeschool as a California resident. Right. Mm-hmm. I think you're right, Lauren. I would agree with you.
So Wendy, what do the charters mark down on that?
It would be a traditional school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If you graduate from a charter, you're a public school student. You look like all the other public school students. Yeah. Okay. I think we got all of the questions. This was really good. You guys were so helpful and so informative. Oh, enrollment windows. I think, Peggy, you said people can enroll like anytime during the year. You go year round.
Yeah,
Marty,
and you can enroll anytime, and say you enroll in November, but it will cover the whole year of August through July.
Right.
We take enrollments year round.
Okay.
Same. Year round.
Right. Well, you never know when families are going to be pulling out of school. And everyone should know that you always have the right to pull your child out of school whenever you decide you need to, right now. Let's see. Do you recommend students in your PSP to take subject matter SATs to fulfill A through G at the UCs? These are great questions.
If that's beneficial to the student, there are a lot of other options you could look at. I lean more towards the community college. I think community colleges are inexpensive. They can be just a wonderful way to go and take those courses, and then you don't have to take those subject level SATs, because if what you're looking to do is skip those freshman, sophomore classes, you could certainly do it that way. You pay money and you have to sit for a standardized test, and I'm not a huge fan of doing either of those things, paying money or sitting for a test. But I will support students who want to do it.
Right.
It's one option, but it's not necessary. A to G is only one of the ways
Yes.
to apply to UC. You do not need to fulfill A to G in order to get into a UC school.
And most homeschool courses from whoever's out there, including EIE, we are not authorized A to G instructors anyway. So you got to be careful there. Just because you're taking the A to G list courses does not mean you qualify as an A to G institution.
Right. When I said that before for that lady who asked about the preparation, that was just academic preparation to be prepared to handle the work. That's all. But homeschoolers basically cannot fulfill A to G as homeschoolers. You could do those tests. You could take college classes. You could do it that way. But for the most part, unless you're in either a private school that is set up with the UC system and grants A to G credit, or a charter school that grants A to G credit, homeschoolers don't apply under A to G credit. They just apply. And usually they're applying under special admit. It's not the only way. You can also apply through the testing program, where you just have to get a much higher score on the SAT. So homeschoolers usually do one or the other. If you're a real good test taker, you could take the SAT and get the required score for your application, or you can apply special admit, which is exactly the same process. It's just that you're in a different pile. You know, there's the SAT pile, there's a testing pile, and there's a special admit pile.
Now,
you can still get
in respect to SATs, your student should take the general SAT, because if you're declared to be a homeschooler by default, that becomes, the SAT score becomes the GPA verification substitute for student loans on your FAFSA application.
Oh, interesting.
Unless you go the community college route, which, like I said, I highly recommend students to go. I know my my oldest daughter was considering USC at one point in time, and they had a strict rule. You had to take the SAT. You had to have a GPA that was a certain thing. You had to be coming from a WASC accredited school. So she asked for admission by exception, and they set up an interview with her, and she went in and told them, I guess in no uncertain terms, I didn't get to attend, but she told them why she was not going to take the standardized test, why the WASC accreditation was not important, and why her GPA from our homeschool was just as good, and they granted her admission. So what they write down as their rules for being admitted, there's always an admission by exception process that you can look for.
Yeah.
And don't forget about CLEP. Boy, if you're in test, go for CLEP and get the credits.
Yeah. I believe USC has a special admissions counselor for homeschoolers now.
That's what I hear.
I think we're confusing people by saying that we're not homeschoolers in California. So I don't really know how to clarify that, because we are homeschoolers, but we're not homeschoolers. So she's saying that we're saying that they're traditional students under the PSP and not homeschooled. So
within our inner circles, I think we talk about ourselves as homeschoolers because that's what we're doing. But when we're talking to bureaucracy, when we're talking to colleges and other high schools, we don't call ourselves homeschoolers. It's like we tell people, if you're going to remove your children from school, you don't march into the office and say, I'm going to homeschool. You march in and, you know, or you send them a letter saying, my kids are going to transfer to this private school or this public school. Otherwise, they're liable to say to you, well, homeschooling is illegal in California. It's not a thing. So it's a weird thing to try to explain, but I say we use the word homeschool just because it's easier when we talk to each other to use that terminology.
Well
Well,
said.
and I think that since
Right.
we don't, there is really no homeschooling in California legally, what happened was the public schools took over the word and they're using it now for their own programs. So
Yeah.
that's also confusing.
Right. Yeah, our charter schools call themselves homeschool charter schools, and I live right next to Parkview, which is an independent study program. Around the sign, it says the homeschool option. So, yeah. Yeah. All right. I think we did it, you guys.
Yay.
Thank you guys so much for being here with us. You were really, really amazing, and I really appreciate it. I know families are hungry for information to know what their options are for next school year. So I think PSPs are a great option. And anyone else have anything else to say before we hang up?
Thanks for doing this, Wendy. It's
Yeah,
a great
thanks for doing this
idea.
with you.
Thanks for inviting us to participate. It's great to be able to meet everybody here and answer questions for potential PSPers.
Yeah, I'm excited. I actually got to finally meet you, Peggy. I've never met
Yeah.
you. Lauren, we've met at the Capitol once. And Marty, I've known you forever. And Carolyn and Shauna, I've known forever. But yeah, so it was great to be able to connect with you guys. And thank you so much for taking care of our homeschool families in our community. I think it's wonderful that we have the PSP option.
Okay, your homework assignment is go get lunch.
That's right. Is everybody starving? Oh, Marty, we were supposed to send a pizza for you.
That's right. Went past 1 o'clock.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend. If we didn't get to your question, I will kind of go through Facebook and see if I missed anything, and I'll type in answers for you. Okay. So
Okay.
thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.